The special thing about the MC of this story is that no matter how many times he dies, he is always reborn again. It's happened so many times that it's not funny anymore, and each time he is reborn in a different world and time, from the most primitive civilizations to those who conquered outer space. This time, our hero's carelessness cost him his life in a battle against a monster, and he was reborn as a baby again. But he's a pro at reincarnation for a reason. Let's see what he comes up with this time. In this current life he's got, he begins to scan his surroundings, and by the looks of the furniture and room decor, he's sure this must be somewhere in the Middle Ages. With the expertise he's built from his past lives, he can tell this isn't Earth, which makes him wonder if he's in a fantasy setting this time. Personally though, he's found the sci-fi worlds to be more comfortable. They were clean, high-tech, and had other perks. But after taking in his current surroundings, he's at least glad he's not born into a poor family. They've even got maids, which leads him to believe this must be a humble upper-class family in a fantasy world. But more than anything, he's pretty glad that this hot chick is his mother, and he's enjoying every kiss from her to the fullest. Though the language she's speaking is unfamiliar, there's something he can understand without knowing the words. The feeling of her holding him so tightly, out of fear of dropping him, and the warmth in her eyes tells him that he's gotten a loving mother in this life, which is a blessing in itself. You see, through his countless lives, he's met and gotten to know all kinds of mothers, but motherly love wasn't always given. Sadly, he's even been abandoned right after birth, and there was also a time he was exploited as child labor. But this time around, he has a good feeling that this life won't be as hard as many of the ones he's lived. That's when a maid comes in and insists on holding the prince as the lady might be exhausted. The mention of prince catches our boy off guard. He wasn't expecting to be reincarnated as royalty this time. Still, he can't quite figure out why his mother does not look so happy. He gets his answer soon enough when his mother reminds the maid that people might not consider this child a prince. Apparently, this lady, Rifana, had a humble background. She used to be a maid, just like the one before her, named Chenna. She tells Chenna to simply call her by her name, saying there's no need for formalities since no one else is around. Rifana believes the only reason they call this child a prince is because the king's blood flows in his veins. However, the truth is far from honorable. This child also carries the blood of someone of lowly status. She already knows that the nobles and royal concubines have rejected her son, claiming he has no right to succession or power because of her humble origins. Seeing his mother drowning in sorrow, the kid quickly tries to wipe away her tears, which genuinely makes her happy. She thinks it's heartwarming that her baby is trying to comfort her. The maid, though, dismisses it as the actions of an infant simply fidgeting. By the way, our boy goes by the name Erel in this life, and we know for a fact he was indeed trying to console his mother. He personally doesn't care about having no right to succession or loyal followers. In fact, he's glad about it. Being overshadowed means the powerful aristocrats won't give him a second glance, making him practically invisible to the rest of the royal family. This suits him perfectly. He's ready to live the life of a carefree prince with nothing to worry about, and his gut feeling tells him that this 101st life is going to be amazing. The main guy is feeling pretty good about himself because he's got both royal and commoner blood. To him, it's like hitting the jackpot since he just wants a simple life away from all the rich dude's drama. Lady Rifana and Chenna are keeping an eye on him. Rifana looks at him, thinks he seems so happy, and wishes she could keep him that way. But she knows she can't. When Errol hears the word power, he wakes up from his dream and starts sucking his thumb. Errol starts thinking about his situation. In a world where everything is about family and rank, being a prince who can't inherit anything feels like being a pawn with no throne to fight for. He realizes he has no power, no backup, and no future. He figures people will just use him until they get rid of him. But then, he reminds himself that his mom doesn't need to worry because he's confident he can handle things, especially since he was a pro in his past lives. 3 months go by, and Lady Rifana looks at baby Errol while he's sleeping. She thinks he looks like a little angel. She strokes his hair and wishes it felt like the king's. Just then, Chenna tells her the carriage is ready. Rifana quickly kisses Errol's cheek and tells him to be good before she leaves. As the door shuts behind her, we see Errol wasn't really asleep. He was faking it. He laughs but quickly covers his mouth so Chenna doesn't come running in to check. Errol thinks it's tough work being this charming, especially as a baby with everyone watching him. He then sits up, ready to do something no baby should be able to do. Power up. He knows time is short, and he needs power to make his life easier. In every world, he knows one thing is always true. Strength is everything. If he's strong, nobody will mess with him. While cultivating, Errol starts thinking about all his past lives and how he didn't waste them. One of his biggest wins was creating a method that lets him train even as a baby, the origin creation Qigong technique. It's something his 30th reincarnation invented, and it's a total game changer. This method lets Errol work on both his natural Qi and origin Qi at the same time. The best part? Nobody can even tell he's training. Arl does some quick math and figures out he'll have 60 years worth of inner Qi by the time he's 10 and 180 by 20 if he keeps this up. Once he gets past the early stages, he won't even need to focus so hard. He could train while chilling in Chenna's arms if he wanted. To speed things up, Errol uses his energy to stimulate his nerves, moving all the chi to his brain and frontal lobe. The heat from this process spreads through his body, making him sweat like crazy and feel sharp, unbearable pain. As the energy builds up, Errol feels like he's about to lose control. He screams but quickly stops himself. Chaina hears the noise and rushes into his room, but when she looks at him, Errol is lying still in his crib, pretending to sleep. She wonders if he needs a diaper change and leans in to sniff. Errol panics inside, knowing any touch from her might ruin all his hard work. But to his relief, Chaina smells nothing and mutters something about him having a bad dream before walking out. Once she's gone, Errol's body is like a mini furnace, with his energy leaking out everywhere. He struggles to keep it together, feeling like his body might not survive the strain. Nonetheless, he pushes through the pain, determined not to let anything or anyone control his life. Even if it means risking everything, Arl is set on using the origin creation Qigong technique to become powerful enough to live comfortably and on his own terms. Just as he steadies himself, another scream escapes him, loud enough for Chaina to hear outside his door. Chaina suddenly rushes into the room, thinking something terrible has happened. She finds Errol sweating buckets but still lying there, looking like he's peacefully sleeping. Deciding he might need some extra care, she runs off to prepare a bath with herbs. The moment she's gone, Errol jumps to his feet, happy because everything he's been working on is finally paying off. When Chaina returns, she carries him in her arms and says good things to him for being such a strong little guy. Errol just smiles, feeling lucky she hasn't noticed anything unusual. Thanks to his mana concentration technique, his body is constantly absorbing energy even when he's just eating or sleeping. He feels thrilled knowing that in just 3 years, he'll be stronger than most adults. By the time he's 10, his power will be unmatched, and the thought makes him really happy. As Chaina holds him, she hears a strange noise from above, but gets distracted by Errol's cheerful expression. Meanwhile, Errol is already imagining the life ahead of him, powerful, respected, and living like a king. He can't wait for that future to arrive. It's been only 5 months since Errol was born, but thanks to his mana absorption technique, his physical strength and inner energy are leagues ahead of any baby his age. Crawling on the floor, he doesn't stop pushing himself, knowing he's on track to surpass everyone soon. Just as he's focused on his training, Lady Rafana walks in and carries him up off the carpet. She brings him a toy he wasn't expecting, and for a moment, his eyes are glued to it. Seeing her disappointment when he hesitates, Errol quickly starts playing with the toy, pretending to have a blast. Inside, though, he feels secondhand embarrassment for very obvious reasons. Still, Lady Rafana and Chaina laugh at how happy he looks, talking about how handsome and perfect he is. Errol secretly loves the praise but knows it's mostly thanks to his mother's good looks. Even so, he decides to embrace these moments of being the fun baby, knowing this time won't last forever. The baby protagonist suddenly shows them that he isn't happy, and Chaina can't figure out what he wants at first, but all he really wants is food. He starts to cry as he tries to make it obvious. Finally, Chaina guesses right and gives him some milk. While he is busy drinking, the adults start talking about money. They talk about how the funds for the house are running low since yesterday. Even though Errol needs proper food as a prince, there just isn't enough money. The mansion's budget has been cut hard this year, and even raising one child is becoming a struggle. This is quite odd for a royal family. Errol overheard the maids talk about this before. They say his mother, Lady Rafana, will have to eat less to save money for everyone else. If she doesn't, nobody will make it through the season. Errol can't believe it and thinks it has to be a joke. But his mother stays positive, saying it doesn't matter if she doesn't survive as long as others can. Hearing this makes Errol upset. How can they treat his mother like this? She isn't powerful or important in the eyes of the nobles, but she's still his mom. Even though she gave birth to a prince, neither of them have any real status or protection. He starts to understand why she is always going out in the carriage. She's been trying to meet the king, but it seems like she keeps failing. Errol thinks it's cruel. Even if the king doesn't care about her, she is still the mother of his child. How can he let others treat her so badly? He starts crying again because of this, and Chaina hands him over to Lady Rafana, and he calms down in her arms. Even as a baby, Errol wants to help his mom. He knows he can't do much, but he has to come up with something. Winter is coming, and things will only get worse with the cost of heating. In his baby bed, he puts his boss baby brains to work and starts thinking hard about what he can do to help. Then suddenly he gets an idea. As Errol stares at the charcoal in the fireplace, he suddenly remembers that charcoals are made out of carbon, and jewels like diamonds are made of carbon as well, and his brilliant mind sees a way to solve their money problem. If he can turn charcoal into a diamond, he could change everything. Even though he's dying to jump out of the crib and get started, he knows his tiny baby body isn't strong enough yet. Instead, he decides to use his mana to float himself out safely. Nobody else knows that charcoal could be this useful, but to Arl, it's like finding treasure. So he immediately pushes away his self-praise and gets to work while the rest of the house is asleep. Errol focuses his mana, combining it with heat to put pressure on the charcoal. He pours every ounce of energy into compressing it, repeating enchanting spells to keep himself going. The process is tough, and the pressure pushes Errol back, but he stays focused, refusing to give up. He keeps thinking about his mother's happiness when she sees what he's made. Just as he thinks about her, a sudden burst of energy causes soot to explode out of the chimney. Errol moves over to the fireplace, digging through the mess until he finally finds it, a sparkling diamond he created with his own power. The diamond's beauty leaves him speechless. Now, he just needs to figure out how to give it to his mother without making her suspicious. Feeling satisfied, he rests until morning. When Chaina greets him the next day, she's shocked to find Errol walking around outside his crib, covered in ash and soot. She picks him up, confused about how he managed to escape. She assumes he must have been playing all night, but the mess in the room makes her pause. The floor, the fireplace, and the carpet are all filthy. And Chaina wonders if the house has always been this chaotic, or if something strange happened during the night. She tells our boy not to touch the floor, but he doesn't seem to care. He quickly comes up with a plan and puts the jewel in his mouth. Chaina notices something strange in his mouth and asks him to spit it out. She pinches his cheeks, and a diamond falls out. She gets very surprised and asks where he got it and if it was from the floor. Chaina, who looks after the palace treasury, says nothing is missing and that the diamond isn't even listed. So she hugs Errol, saying it seems like he wanted to give it to her. Errol smiles and agrees, with a feeling that his mom would probably like it too. Later, wagons pull up at the palace, filling up the empty kitchen storage with food and firewood. Thanks to the diamond, they now have 5 years' worth of supplies. Lady Rafana worries about who the diamond might belong to, but Chaina assures her that it's fine since the castle was abandoned for nearly 100 years before Lady Rafana took over. She also adds that it could be a blessing meant for Prince Errol. Lady Rafana isn't sure, but she sure feels thankful for the resources. Errol holds onto his mom's dress, thinking she just needs to hang in there until he grows up. He dreams of a future where she doesn't have to struggle anymore. As he clings to her, she promises to make sure the king knows he has a son named Errol. That winter, the fireplace keeps burning, and the palace's finances finally get back on track. The changes are obvious around the palace. One day, while Lady Rafana is eating, she notices the meal is way too much for her and asks about the servants. Chaina assures her everything is fine since Anna, who had quit, is back, and the servants are being treated better now. But what stands out the most to Prince Errol is how his mom isn't looking sad anymore. As he watches her, he thinks she looks prettiest when she smiles. Even though it's the coldest winter ever, it feels warmer to him because things are stable, and his mom is happy. A year passes, and Chaina and Lady Rafana are busy deciding what Prince Errol should wear. They make him try on a bunch of outfits before picking a fancy one. Errol can't figure out why they're making such a big deal about his clothes. Feeling tired, he lies down on the floor and starts whining, surprising both his mom and Chaina. Chaina quickly figures out he needs to rest and tucks him into his crib. Then she says that Prince Errol is going to be officially recognized as part of the royal family. Errol, confused, wonders what she means by recognized. Lady Rafana is happy Errol has grown up without any issues and wonders if the king will show up for his birthday. Chaina reassures her, saying the king is just waiting for the right time since bad things often happen to newborns. Errol overhears them talking and realizes all this fuss is for his birthday. Lady Rafana says not everyone might like the banquet, but it's the perfect chance to officially announce that Errol has royal blood. She's glad the Ernesia royal family rules apply to him too. Errol notices how excited his mom seems and figures it's because of the banquet. Then it hits him. If there's a banquet, the nobles and other royals will be there, and he might finally get to meet the king. The banquet for Prince Errol kicks off that night with a grand feast and an over-the-top party that clearly cost quite more than a fortune. Prince Errol is kinda thrilled to see the lavish decorations, the food, and the fancy outfits the kingdom homie's wearing. Everything feels like a dream to him. Lady Rafana picks him up and asks if he's amazed. Errol thinks this whole thing is definitely a new experience. Chaina points out that it's probably the first time he's seen so many people in one place, and Lady Rafana reminds him that he's the star tonight, giving him a kiss on the cheek. Errol catches the judgmental stares from the nobles and overhears their whispers about him and his mother, but he doesn't let it bother him. His focus is on one thing, meeting his father, King Terrell of Ernesia. Errol burns with frustration, thinking about how the king has never cared about their lives. He decides this banquet is the perfect chance to make sure the king notices him. The atmosphere changes as the royal family of Ernesia walk in, officially starting the banquet. Errol figures this must be the queen and her family. He can feel their strong presence as they approach. His eyes lock onto the queen, her children, his half-siblings, and the eldest son, who stands out the most. There's also a girl acting dramatic, like she's in her own fantasy world. Errol mentally notes that he needs to learn more about each of them, but they walk right past and completely ignore his mother. Lady Rafana notices the commotion might be overwhelming for Errol and tries to comfort him, even though Errol knows she's probably struggling herself. She still manages to make him laugh, easing the tension. Meanwhile, the crowd is fixated on the queen, admiring her beauty. Errol notices a sudden change in his mother's expression. It had been calm, but now something has unsettled her. He looks around and sees why. The king, His Majesty, finally enters, radiating an intimidating energy that makes Errol freeze for a moment. He can't tell if his father is looking at him or his mom. He thinks it's unlucky that being reborn doesn't come with the ability to read minds. Imagine how great it'd be if he could figure out what everyone else is thinking. After a while, people start giving him gifts and congratulating him. acting like it's such a big deal to see him. But when it's the imperial family's turn, their attitude toward him and his mom is clear. They don't hide their real feelings, and their behavior hits him hard. He wants to jump out of his mom's arms and properly go after that woman. How dare she treat him and his mom like they don't even matter? She clearly doesn't see them as people. Looking around, he realizes everyone here is just as fake and rotten. For a moment, he thinks about shouting and calling them all out. But he doesn't want to make his mom feel embarrassed. He decides to play along and act nice because that's what people expect. Hypocrisy is normal here, unfortunately. All he wants is to leave before he falls asleep in his mom's arms. Just as he's about to drift off, he notices a young girl nearby. She's probably one of the king's concubine's daughters. She seems too young for all this drama, but her presence stands out. Thankfully, some of the mistresses have already left. When the banquet finally ends, he and his mom sigh in relief at the same time. But the night isn't over yet. The queen herself approaches them. She makes it clear that getting near them isn't hard, thanks to her son, the heir to the throne, who is always close by. Errol can't tell if she's bragging about her son or just trying to rub it in. Either way, it's exactly the kind of thing he expects from her. The queen goes on to say how sweet Errol is and how much he resembles his mom, but Errol isn't buying it. He's sure she has something to do with their struggles. After all, someone has to be behind the drastic cuts to their castle's finances. The knights had been turned into lumberjacks just to gather firewood, and Errol's clothes look like they've been pieced together from scraps by the servants. Meanwhile, the queen wishes him a long life and other formal niceties, but as she leaves, she smirks, leaving a sour impression. Then something unexpected happens. Lady Rafana spots the king himself. He asks if she is getting used to the castle, and she gives a polite but not entirely truthful answer, which doesn't surprise Errol. All he wants is for the king to give them the support they need and act like a proper father. Errol starts crying loudly, which makes the king take notice and ask to hold him. It's the first time the king has seen Errol in a year. As he holds him, the king seems kind of confused. Most of his kids cry nonstop when they see him, but Errol just smiles. Errol thinks it would be funny if his charming baby smile could leave the king stunned. The king seems to start liking him a little bit, amused that Errol isn't scared of him. He even says something about raising him in the future. But Errol isn't interested in staying still. He makes gestures, signaling for the king to put him down. The king assumes Errol wants to walk, but Lady Rafana quickly says he can't walk yet since he's only a year old. At that moment, though, Errol decides it's time to prove everyone wrong. He takes his first steps right then and there, knowing he's the star of the evening and needing to show off. The room erupts in excitement as everyone cheers for little Errol's first steps. Even the king seems impressed, realizing Errol is trying to show him something important, that he isn't like other kids. Errol feels confident that this is just the start of proving himself. But as he reaches the table and tries to steady himself on it, he performs an epic fail. The whole table, along with all the food and drinks, comes crashing down. As the plates and glasses come crashing down onto Errol, everyone is freaked out, even the king. But Errol? This was all part of his grand little scheme. Not just to show off that a 1-year-old could walk, but to pull off his perfectly executed dramatic act. He lies on the ground crying like he's in the middle of an epic tragedy, and the king picks him up, checking for injuries. The king sees that Errol's clothes are soaked in wine but finds no real harm. He decides Errol needs a change of clothes. Chaina steps in to help, but the king waves her off, wanting to handle it himself. What he discovers next leaves him speechless. Underneath Errol's stained clothes are undergarments that look more like scraps than anything worthy of a prince. Chaina looks confused, claiming she had dressed Errol in fresh clothes earlier that morning. As the king inspects the fit, he realizes how shabby and pitiful Errol's life must be, and the crowd starts murmuring, saying stuff about it being disgraceful and all. Frustrated by the whispers, the king demands silence, with his voice blasting through the hall and sending shivers down everyone's spines. He looks at Errol's mother, clearly processing how poorly they've been living. Meanwhile, Errol is feeling quite relieved. His plan worked perfectly. His clothes might have been ruined, but they had told the story he wanted. In reality, Errol had been busy that morning. While Chaina was getting him dressed, he used all his tiny strength to stretch and tear at the cloth, making it look as raggedy as possible. It wasn't hard, and with a little magic, he gave his outfit the extra touch of poverty he needed to make his statement. If he were older and stronger, he wouldn't have needed to rely on magic, but it worked anyway. The king finally asks Lady Rafana to explain how things got this bad. How could they fail so much at maintaining their status? But seeing how distressed she is, he doesn't press her for answers. Instead, he turns to one of his officials and asks how funds are distributed for the concubines' castles. The king is disappointed because, as far as he remembers, he'd given clear orders for the budget to be shared equally. Everything was supposed to be running smoothly. So why, at this event of all places, does it look like they've been forgotten? The king can't understand what's going on. He demands the report immediately, wasting no time. Watching all of this, Errol realizes his father is serious about figuring things out, and he's eager to see the numbers in that report. Lady Rafana, Errol's mother, wants to smooth things over, claiming it must be some mistake, and asks for her son back. But Errol knows this is their one big chance. While everyone panics, and the king's secretary pulls up to deliver the documents, the entire room holds its breath, knowing things are about to get heated. When the king looks at the report, he's quite stunned. He can't believe what his eyes are seeing. So he uses his power to set the papers ablaze right there, which shocks Errol. Errol hadn't imagined his father could be so clueless about what's been going on. The truth is, it's obviously all the queen's doing. The king calls to his queen, demanding to know if she was aware of the situation. The queen tries to play it cool, pretending to be just as shocked as everyone else. But the king ain't having it. His intimidating presence grows as he reminds her that managing the budget is entirely her responsibility. Seeing what's up, the eldest son decides to use his perfect timing to pull up and defend his mama. He isn't about to let his mother face this alone and wants to share his own opinion right then and there. The prince tries to explain that this is some big old mix-up, because he's sure his mom wouldn't do something like this. But the king gets even angrier, saying it doesn't matter because a leader is always responsible for their team's mistakes. And thanks to her carelessness, his little brother ended up hungry and without clothes. The older son looks at our hero with these super guilty eyes, which just makes the situation even more awkward. It's clear he's nothing like his dad, who's strong and commanding, or his mom, who's smart and sneaky. The king turns to the eldest son and asks if he's seriously saying his mom had nothing to do with this. Then, without waiting for an answer, he tells his queen how disappointed he is in her. Lady Rafana, trying to defend the queen, keeps saying it's not her fault, instead it's hers, and that she messed up. The king, totally confused now, wonders what she's even talking about. He tells her that just being the mother of his kid should be enough to prove her place in the family. She looks a little embarrassed, and the king gently touches her hand, reminding her to know her role and act accordingly. This whole scene really ticks off the queen and her son, and the king demands that they find out who's to blame and make sure this never happens again. The queen, clearly shaken, looks down at the floor and promises to handle it and make sure it won't happen again. The king gives her one final warning: mess up again, and she'll face punishment. The queen keeps apologizing, saying she'll find the guilty party and make them pay, but she still doesn't seem to get why he's this mad. She then insists she has no idea how this happened, not knowing how to explain herself to Lady Rafana, who is also really stressed out. But the hero sees right through the queen. While his mom tries to say there's no mistake and defends the queen, our protagonist can't figure out why his mom is protecting the one person who probably knows every little detail about what went down. The queen promises this won't happen again, but only our hero realizes that at least she could pretend to look guilty. Instead, she just scares everyone with her power. With that, the hero's birthday ends, and somehow the financial mess is fixed. Later on, it's announced that the queen didn't even have a hand in sorting it out. The culprit is quickly found, a family of low-ranking nobles. They're blamed for everything and, without much fuss, executed on the spot with a guillotine. The palace servants gossip about how the aristocrats even confessed to the crime, but no one can figure out where they'd spend such a massive amount of money. Everyone seems relieved the issue is resolved, except for our baby boy. He can tell the real mastermind has gotten away scot-free. The case is closed, but to the hero, it's totally unfair. He makes up his mind, when he grows up, he'll teach everyone a lesson. But for now, being a baby with a small body means his main focus is food, so his only response is to cry. Soon he's being spoon-fed and feels pretty happy with his current situation. Still, he knows he needs to work on his body since he's going to be stuck as a baby for a while. But after thinking it over, he realizes all he really has to do is eat and play. Once his belly is full, he decides it's nap time. Sometime later, he wakes up to the sound of a carriage pulling up to the house. He flies to the window to check it out while his babysitter snoozes. He sees a group of people step out, and soon after, 3 of them enter his room. His mom, an adult, and a child. The hero suddenly remembers the babysitter. If she wakes up, his powers will be exposed, so he flies back to her and starts pinching her cheeks to wake her up. The adults immediately walk in just in time to see this, and his mom immediately yells at him to stop tormenting the poor nanny. The nanny notices another mistress has arrived and greets her right away. Our hero spots the newcomer too. The newly arrived mistress quickly says there's no need to apologize because she didn't warn anyone about her visit. Our hero realizes this is Phenelia, another concubine. Everyone starts saying how they would have welcomed her properly if they knew she was coming. But Phenelia says she needs to talk to our hero's mother alone. Our hero's mother can't figure out why Phenelia wants to see her, but assumes it must be serious. While waiting for the serious talk, she ends up choking on her tea. Phenelia, looking genuinely regretful, apologizes for her behavior at Prince Errol's birthday banquet. She explains her family once played a big role in winning battles on the continent and were well known, but those glory days are over. Now, they're struggling because no sons have been born in the family lately, and their reputation has faded. On top of that, rumors say they've been low on money for years. Our hero's mother asks if Phenelia is here because of her family's problems. Phenelia admits they're deeply in debt. She also recalls being pressured by the queen, which probably added to their financial mess. Phenelia pulls out a bag of money, admitting it's not enough to fix things, but says she feels really bad about everything. She admits our hero's mother probably hates her and her family. Just then, the door opens, and Phenelia's daughter quietly appears in the room. It becomes clear Fenelia only wants to shield her child from getting tangled up in conflicts with the imperial family. The mistress calmly says she's fine and doesn't need anything, insisting that Fenelia isn't at fault for any of this. Fenelia asks her not to pity her, but the mistress says she doesn't feel pity, she's just being straightforward. She points out that there's no reason for them to turn against each other now. The mistress makes it clear she understands the situation and doesn't hold any grudges against Fenelia's family. She gives the bag of money back, saying that it would be better spent on something nice for Fenelia's little daughter. She says she understands why Fenelia's family has been trying to manage their palace expenses. Then, she casually brings up some shocking news. She believes the reason behind all of this is that she serves her queen. This revelation leaves our boy stunned, and suddenly it all makes sense to him on why his mother is so disliked by others. He starts walking around his room, thinking about how hard his mother's life must be. Chaina notices he's upset and doesn't know how to calm him down. She asks if he's okay, and he quickly fakes a smile to stop her from worrying. He knows he needs to pull himself together. Chaina just assumes he's just being stupid moody, and goes off to do some exercises with Princess Kania. With everyone distracted, our boy decides to sneakily listen in on the conversation between his mother and Fenelia again. This time, his mother is talking about how she can't escape the queen's oppression. She explains that her main goal is to protect Errol while he's still young, and to stop anyone from hurting their family further. Her tone is more serious and determined than it's ever been. Lady Rafana wants to get closer to Miss Fenelia, but it's clear she has more on her mind than just being friendly. Fenelia sees this, but respects Rafana's determination and agrees. They both figure they can rely on each other when things get tough. Meanwhile, Prince Errol is deep in thought, realizing his mother is fully aware of what's really up between the queen and the concubines, which involves both him and her. But he also wonders what her next move would be. While Errol is lost in thought, a girl suddenly shows up near him, and he has no clue how she got there. He silently begs the universe to keep her away, but instead, she crawls into his bed and starts squishing his cheeks, saying she finds him adorable. She treats him like a squishy toy, and even starts moving his crib around like it's a game. Our boy wishes that someone, even if it's Truck-kun, would rescue him from this chaos. Then comes a cat, and at first, it seems like the cat thinks Errol is cute too. Errol knows there's no escaping now. The nanny says that the princess might visit. Of course, the princess is eager to come over, and Errol realizes he's on his own with no escape in sight. Time flies, and before long, Errol is almost 3 years old. Life feels like it's moving way too fast, as usual. He can't believe how quickly he's growing up and starts thinking about how much more he has to learn before adulthood. He remembers bits of his previous life and wonders if he'll ever get a chance to relive anything like that. Suddenly, the princess walks into his room. She rushes toward him, but Errol decides to lay a little hide and seek. Unfortunately, she finds him in no time, and he's frustrated and feeling down, but the princess just wants to play hide and seek. Before Errol could refuse, she's already running off to find a bigger spot to play. They end up outside, and it's clear the princess has been visiting a lot since Fenelia came over, with help from the nanny, of course. Errol doesn't mind too much because it seems like these visits are building a strong bond. Even though Errol is still small, Kania believes he's already someone who can be looked after. But she also says that when Errol grows up, it'll be his turn to take care of her instead. The princess makes Errol promise he'll come as soon as possible, but the little prince can't figure out why she's so fixated on him. Before he can think too much about it, Kania says that she adores him. She says playing with him is way more fun than with the others. He's clearly the best choice. Errol laughs, thinking she'll probably regret saying that when she gets older. Kania carries him up immediately, saying it's time to play, and insists on carrying him to their spot. The problem is, Errol feels like he's about to suffocate from her overly enthusiastic help. He silently begs for rescue, and just then, a maid steps in, saying that Errol must be uncomfortable being carried like that. She scolds Kania, saying that even as a princess, she shouldn't carry heavy things yet since she's still a child herself. Errol feels real relief he's finally saved. Although Kania isn't happy at all. She shouts that she wants to play. The maid says she should try drawing or listening to something classical instead, but Kania is sick of all that boring stuff. She says she wants to swing a sword, just like her brother Kyle. Errol notices her practicing with a stick and quickly realizes her balance is way off. The stick's weight is all wrong, and she's not holding it properly. Despite this, Kania is completely into it, imagining she's already defeated some powerful imaginary swordmaster and claiming victory for herself. The maid tries to explain why Kania isn't allowed to practice like Kyle and Lennon. This really upsets the princess, who can't understand why they're allowed but not her. The maid tells her that it isn't proper for a princess to dirty her hands, reminding Kania that she's supposed to be elegant and ladylike. Kania isn't listening, some Mulan vibes. She's already snatched up the maid's sword, and before the maid could stop her, she's talking excitedly about swordsmanship. The maid panics and chases after her, begging her to hand over the sword, or at least just take the sheath instead. Errol stands nearby, and he finds himself liking Kania more and more now. As time goes by, Prince Errol turns 5. He's out in the fields of his land, looking all royal and bold, pretending to race on his mighty steed. But let's not get carried away. He's just rocking back and forth on a toy horse, having the time of his life. Chaina, his maid companion slash horse trainer, says he should try riding a real horse, but Arel waves it off, saying it's too risky. Chaina tries to hype him up, telling him a prince his age should be into stuff like riding horses and swinging swords. But Arel is like, nah, princes don't have to do all that. This leaves Chaina feeling bummed because he's not exactly oozing ambition. Here's the catch, Arel's no ordinary kid. This is his 101st life. Yep, the guy's been through the ringer more times than he can count. Over all those lifetimes, he's figured out one harsh truth. Being too good at anything only brings trouble. Every time he's been a pro at something like sword fighting or magic, it's drawn all the wrong people, either wanting to use him or take him down. So now, he's all about staying low-key and enjoying the perks of being a prince without breaking a sweat. Back at the castle, Arel tells Chaina he needs some alone time, and she agrees, though she's not thrilled about it. Once she's gone, he shuts the door, kicks back, and just lies there doing nothing. Later, they end up in a bit of a pickle. Chaina's frustrated, asking why he hates studying so much, pointing out that a 5-year-old prince should be eager to learn and grow. But Arel's totally not interested, don't care about the world, and definitely not into cramming knowledge. Chaina sighs, half joking that he sounds like someone who's lived 100 lifetimes. Before she can go on, Arel cuts her off and assures her it's not her fault he's like this. Deep down, he decides it's time to just enjoy life for once. YOLO vibes? Not for Arel. It only took him 100 lives to figure out how to kick back and take it easy. Maybe he's just a chill guy, who knows? Chaina reminds Prince Arel that by royal rules, he has to start studying now that he's 5. She pulls out some super basic books, saying they were picked just for him. But Arel, looking all moody, grabs one and shows off his book skills by spinning it around like a toy. Chaina's totally pissed, telling him books are for reading, not spinning. She even tries the guilt trip, saying regular dudes would love to learn but don't get the chance. But Arel doesn't give a care in the world. He starts stacking the books into a mini house instead. Chaina, trying to hold it together, tells him to knock it off and sit back down, but Arel's not listening at all. When words don't work, he goes full drama mode, whining and yelling that he won't study. Suddenly, the doors open and his mom walks in, looking like she's had enough. And let's be real, nothing stops spoiled brats faster than a mom's "I'm gonna kill you" stare. Under her watch, Arel drags himself to the library and starts studying, though not without some complaints. Even while pretending to study, Arel's thinking about how ridiculous this all is. He knows that if his parents really cared about him learning, they'd make sure he was protected. But in his world, being good at anything is just asking for trouble. The more talent a kid like him shows, the more dangerous life gets, for him and everyone around him. Arel doesn't think it's fair, but life is what it is. All he wants is a chill, lazy life where no one's at risk. As he zones out, Chaina snaps him back to reality, telling him to study hard and make people proud, as if that's going to solve anything. Arel thinks about what Chaina says but decides it's a bit much for him. Chaina doesn't let it go though, telling him that if he keeps acting like this, his mom's going to feel sad. That hits a nerve, and Arel finally decides to put in some effort for his mom's sake, not because he suddenly loves studying. Even so, he's firm on one thing: no sword training, no magic lessons. He's had enough of dealing with the chaos that comes with being gifted. Instead, he starts thinking about other, less risky plans for his future. A few days later, a fancy carriage pulls up at the concubine's place. Chaina tells Arel that a mage from the magic tower is here to check his mana. If he's got the talent, they'll start teaching him magic. That's bad news for Arel. He knows any decent mage would sense the crazy amount of mana he's hiding. He figures the only way out is to keep his mana under wraps. As he walks down the hallway to meet this tester, he keeps his head down, trying to look as plain as possible. Chaina tries to cheer him up, saying even if his mana isn't super impressive, he can still work on it. But when they open the door, the tester's face says it all, shocked, like they just saw something they weren't ready for. The mage stands up quickly and looks right at Prince Arel. As they size each other up, Arel watches the mana flowing through the mage, wondering how he looks in the mage's eyes. The mage grabs Arel's arm to check his vitals and says that something feels off. Chaina, trying to hype him up, asks if Arel is special. But the mage isn't sure whether to call him special or just plain weird, since he can't sense any mana in Arel at all. Even after trying to probe with mana, the mage finds nothing, leaving Chaina completely shocked. Arel leans back in his chair, feeling all chill about how well he's hiding his mana like some last-stitch secret weapon. Before walking into the room, he had used his chi to compress his mana and push it to the edges of his body. When the mage looked surprised earlier, Arel knew his plan was working. The idea of someone from a royal bloodline having no mana didn't make any sense, and Arel had totally thrown him off. The mage tells Lady Rafana that Arel has no potential for magic, leaving her confused. He adds that even commoners have a tiny bit of mana, but Arel doesn't seem to have any at all. Some Rock Lee and Guy vibes. After hearing this, our boy starts to wonder if he went a little too far. Lady Rafana looks crushed, realizing her son might not have what it takes to become a mage. But this is exactly what Arel wants. He's playing the long game, making everyone think he's totally useless with mana. As he sits there pretending to sulk, he knows this is just the start of his act. The next day, Arel meets his new swordsmanship trainer, a young knight named Landfill Tagaron. Errol takes one look at him and silently judges him as boring and weak, not even close to his level. In his past life, Errol had fought monsters and survived brutal battles, so this guy doesn't impress him. Still, Errol decides to play along, agreeing to train and encouraging both of them to grow stronger together, even if he's not expecting much. Errol secretly thinks this whole training thing is more for Landfill's sake than his own. He's definitely not interested in doing anything too hard. Like his sister Kania, who walks around wearing weights to get stronger. So many Rock Lee references in this. The dude explains that intense training like that is a tradition for the Kinchester family, but Errol says it sounds like something martial artists would do, not royalty. When Errol asks about the plan, the swordsman dude explains that swordsmanship isn't just about strength, it's also about balance and flexibility. To prove his point about flexibility, Landfill flexes on them kids, showing off some fancy sword moves and suggests starting with simple exercises, like balancing on logs. Errol immediately complains about being scared of falling, even though the logs are barely off the ground, but Landfill assures him that even if he does caplunk, it won't hurt. Errol then asks what he's supposed to do since he's afraid of heights. Next, they move on to flexibility training. Landfill assumes Errol would have no problem since he's still a kid, but Errol shocks him by struggling to even touch his toes. The swordsman dude doesn't give up. He decides it's time to practice with wooden swords. He explains how to use centrifugal force to swing properly. Errol gives it a try, but his grip is so bad the sword goes flying. Landfill looks stunned as Errol completely messes up the exercise. Errol, pretending to be crushed, tells Landfill he's hopeless at swordsmanship. But Landfill encourages him, saying it's only his first try and he'll get better with practice. Handing him another sword, they continue the session. The whole time, Errol is very aware of someone watching him. His clumsy performance is all part of his plan to spread rumors about how bad he is, making sure word gets around the city. Rumors are flying among the nobles that Prince Errol is even worse off than commoners when it comes to mana. People are saying he's failed at every kind of training, and he's so clumsy he could trip over nothing. While some find it hilarious, it's not doing Errol any favors. At the concubine's castle, Errol is chilling with cookies and orange juice. Kind of a surprising combo for medieval times, when he hears about a new private tutor coming to teach him. The gossip about him being useless has scared off most tutors, so Errol's curious about who's brave, or crazy, enough to take the job. He looks out the window just in time to see the tutor stepping out of a carriage. A few minutes later, he finds out the guy's name is Gamel Pernia. The vibe in the room immediately gets awkward, with Gamel stuck teaching someone everyone thinks is hopeless, and Errol already bored out of his mind. Errol sighs and figures they might as well start with literature, focusing on foreign and common languages. Gamel piles up books in front of him and says basic grammar should only take a day to learn. But since Errol's reputation is so bad, Gamel gives him a few days instead, acting like it's no big deal if he can't get it right. This annoys Errol, so he promises to give it his best shot. Gamel keeps talking, saying bad grades don't always mean someone isn't trying. Sometimes, it's just how the brain works. He basically says it's not Errol's fault, but the backhanded compliment feels worse than outright criticism. Errol starts feeling the weight of people looking down on him. Sure, he wanted everyone to stop expecting so much from him, but he hadn't expected their pity to sting so much. Late at night, Errol goes ninja baby mode and sneaks into the library, feeling himself about his top-tier language skills. Thanks to hundreds of past lives, he's been fluent in multiple languages since he was a toddler. As he walks through the library, he wonders if he should let everyone know just how much of a genius he really is. He focuses mana in his hands and starts searching for books on vocabulary and grammar, using magic to pull them off the shelves as he walks by because he's too midgety to reach. He doesn't stop there, though. He grabs books in foreign languages, too, trying to know even more than he already does. With everything neatly stacked on a table, he gets to work. Flipping open a book, Errol thinks about how all languages follow the same basic rules. He's lived 100 lives, and in every one of them, he's been busy learning. That night, starts studying hard, very much determined to show off just how smart he is the next day. A few days later, Gamel pills up, saying his jokes have gone too far and asking if he really understands the common language. Errol sighs and says he's not lying, even trying to prove it by reading something. Gamel feels like he might have just memorized some passages, but Errol says to him that even memorizing a whole language would be impressive. Considering how tricky the kingdom's official language is compared to others, Gamel challenges him to pick a random book and read it. He points out that even the smartest kids need to be at least 12 to handle basic reading, and Errol's only 5. Errol immediately grabs a book and reads it flawlessly, leaving Gamel in total shock. Gamel is quite overwhelmed and even starts tearing up, calling Errol's talent extraordinary. After all, when a student excels, it makes the teacher look good too, you know. Errol tells his teacher that he should feel lucky to have such a genius for a student. Fired up loads, Gamel jumps into the day's lesson, ready to teach his brilliant pupil. By the next night, the rumors about Errol take a wild turn. Where people used to mock him for being clumsy and useless with a sword, now they're all hyped about how he mastered the common language in just 2 days. Rumors start flying here and there about how Errol can solve math problems in his head like it's nothing. And just like that, the legend of a genius Errol is born. But where did these stories come from? Turns out, Down at a local tavern, someone's been spilling the tea, or beer rather. Gamel, Errol's tutor, is sitting there, a little too tipsy, bragging to anyone who'll listen about how he always saw the prince's potential when everyone else didn't. He's going on and on about how hidden talents just need the right teacher, aka him, to shine. Before long, word about Errol's smarts makes its way to the king. The king is pretty amazed and talks with Lady Rafana about how their son might have struggled with all the sword and magic stuff because it just wasn't his thing. Lady Rafana apologizes for causing any worry, but thinks that, as his mom, she should have realized how special he was sooner. The king, seeing her concern, reassures her. They share one of those heartfelt and very cultured moments that would make the queen need eye bleach, and he tells her he's sure their son will grow up to do amazing things. Meanwhile, our boy is out here eavesdropping on the whole conversation, thinking to himself that, yeah, he'll do just enough to keep the king impressed, pick a good spot in life, and have some fun while he's at it. And so, Errol kicks off his 101st life, this time as a brainiac prince. A few days later, he notices more guards hanging around outside the concubine's castle. It doesn't take long for him to figure out that since he can't fight or use magic, the king probably sent them to keep him safe. Errol feels a little proud, guessing the king's in a pretty good mood. But then, some loud sound behind him grabs his attention. Chaina has dropped off a massive chest, and his mom explains it's a gift from the king. Errol immediately opens it and finds it stuffed with gold coins, shiny jewels, and all kinds of treasures. As he's digging through, something catches his eye, a unique-looking necklace. Chaina asks if it's the priciest thing in the chest, but Errol decides it's not about the cost. This necklace is the coolest thing in there by far. Errol puts on the necklace and says it gives you big brain time and also helps you think faster while keeping you from getting tired. Chaina is super impressed, thinking it's all because of how hard Errol's been studying ladle, but he just makes it look like it's no big deal. The truth is, while the necklace looks pretty basic to everyone else, Errol can see the mana-triggering gadget hidden inside the jewel. Not that he needs it, but his inner chi does way more. As he does stuff with the necklace, he starts thinking about Kania, who's been working out like crazy for her sword training and is now seriously ripped. He asks his mom if he can give the necklace to Kania, and she gently pats his head and says that since it's a gift from the king, giving it as a present would probably make the king happy too. She then asks what Errol likes about Kania. He says it's her strength, which makes all the maids burst into a mad laughter. That day, the whole concubine's castle is booming with joy, knowing that Errol is not only recognized but also favored by the king. The young knight even brags about it to his fellow guards, reminding them to take pride in being part of the concubine's castle. A few days later, Errol is sitting in the dining hall with Chaina. She tells him all the desserts he requested are ready and asks what he thinks of them. Errol tries one after another but isn't happy with any of them. He's annoyed and keeps searching for something better. Chaina encourages him to slow down and enjoy the treats, asking if they taste good. Errol, frustrated, says none of them are sweet enough because they're all missing what he's looking for. Chaina, confused, says these desserts were made by the best chefs and offers to bring one over to fix the problem. That's when Errol has a light bulb moment. What he needs isn't a chef, he asks for an alchemist instead, which just surprises and confuses Chaina. Prince Errol starts spacing out, thinking about Coca-Cola and snacks from his old life, practically drooling, just imagining the taste. He figures he'll need an alchemist to recreate cola, but that's easier said than done. Chaina, super confused about why he'd want an alchemist, asks him what's going on. Errol freezes, realizing she must have heard him daydreaming out loud. He thinks about explaining but quickly decides it'll sound way too weird, especially since he's only 5. Instead, he starts putting together the problem. The kingdom doesn't have the right seasonings or fancy techniques needed to make something like cola. The more he thinks about it, the more he realizes how tricky it'll be. Making cola isn't just mixing stuff together. It needs all these extra steps he can't even do yet. Feeling bummed, he starts fantasizing about the fizzy, sweet drink again. But then he snaps out of it and reminds himself that he's supposed to be a genius scholar. If anyone can figure it out, it's him. He suddenly jumps up and bolts out of the room. Chaina stares after him, completely lost, and asks where he's off to. He yells back that he's going to study, leaving her scratching her head, wondering if she even heard him right. Errol, meanwhile, is sprinting through the castle, laser-focused on one thing, chemistry. He knows cooking and chemistry go hand in hand, so he's convinced alchemy is the key to cracking the cola code, no matter how tough it'll be. Fast forward 3 years. Now 8 years old, Prince Errol is running a meeting, sitting at the head of a big table. They're talking about building new bridges in areas where merchants travel a lot. One of the supervisors asks what he thinks about the plans. Errol checks out the blueprints, compliments how impressive they look, and then casually asks who designed them. When a supervisor proudly claims credit, Errol's expression changes. He threatens to fire the guy if he ever shows up with another useless design. The room? Dead silent. Prince Errol points out a few problems in the bridge design, saying that while it might work for now, it'll be a disaster when snow piles up in the winter. The weight would crush the wooden parts underneath because the designers cared more about making it look fancy than keeping it safe. Our boy makes it clear that while the kingdom should look impressive, safety has to come first. He demands they redo the design and then moves on to the next blueprint. With his crazy amount of knowledge, Errol's workload is kind of shooting through the roof. The so-called experts in the room can't hold a candle to him, but they've decided to trust this 8-year-old genius anyway. Our boy feels a little bad for them, but he knows he's got no choice. He has to keep proving himself. After the meeting, as Errol heads out, a new maid spots him and calls him by his latest nickname, the Young Grey Sage. He's instantly horrified and thinks it's the cheesiest thing ever. Realizing the maid must be new, he tells her not to use that nickname again because he can't stand it. She promises to remember, but as he walks off, she almost messes up and says it again. Errol, now extra annoyed, silently swears that nickname is the lamest thing he's ever heard. As his carriage moves off, Lady Rafana looks out the window and asks Chaina if Errol is heading somewhere important. Chaina tells her that he's going to see the king, which makes her wonder what they'll talk about. Chaina hesitates, almost saying that Errol is interested in learning alchemy. Meanwhile, up in the carriage, our boy is busy imagining how the king might react when he drops his alchemy request out of nowhere. Even though his audience request was approved right away, Errol figures the king must trust him now, especially since he's been handling so many responsibilities like a pro. Prince Errol stares out the window, trying to shake off the nerves. Even after living through 100 lives, the king's aura still feels overwhelming. He keeps reminding himself to stay calm and not mess up when it's time to talk. When the king asks why he wants to learn alchemy, Errol explains it's because he wants to help the kingdom and the king more. Since he's no good with swords or magic, all he can do is gain knowledge and put it to use. The king listens carefully, impressed by how thoughtful Errol is, and agrees to his request. He promises to connect Errol with some reliable alchemists, and even asks if there's anything else he needs. Errol politely says he'll ask later if something comes up. As the king smiles warmly, Errol feels pretty chill, knowing his plan worked perfectly. Word spreads fast, and soon all the best alchemists in the kingdom show up, eager to prove themselves and maybe earn some recognition. It's no surprise when Demon Ranchette gets picked. He's known for creating these crazy reflective mirrors that bounce sunlight super far, which he installed on the western fortress to keep invaders away. A few days later, Errol meets Demon in the garden of the concubine's castle. Demon casually compliments the beauty of the garden, but Errol is more focused on him. Based on his legendary reputation, Errol expected some old, wise-looking alchemist, but Demon turns out to look surprisingly young. Noticing the confusion, Demon explains that his hair turned white years ago after a little accident with toxic fumes. Our boy realizes that Demon almost lost his life while learning. Demon, staying calm, warns Errol to be ready for the risks. If anything happens to the Our Boy during experiments, Demon for sure knows he'll be held responsible, maybe even with his own life, or worse. Demon explains that alchemy is way harder and more dangerous than Errol probably thinks. He even points out how young Errol is, but before he can finish, Our Boy cuts him off. He tells him that he knows what he's getting into. Alchemy isn't magic, it's science, and he's not chasing silly dreams like turning rocks into marshmallows, or going miracle mode by turning into wine. What he really wants is practical tech, methods to clean iron ores and create stronger metals for the kingdom. Demon is blown away by Errol's ambition and sharp thinking. He feels this kid is destined to lead the kingdom of Ernesia someday. After being inspired by Errol's speech, he kneels before Our Boy, telling him that although his skills are lacking, he'll teach him everything that he knows. A few days pass since alchemy class kicks off, and Prince Errol is deep in his studies when Demon suddenly asks if he's done this alchemy stuff before. Errol gets caught off guard, thinking maybe he's been showing off too much, but he quickly changes the subject, saying he just read about it in a book. Demon seems cool with that and even says Errol matches the rumors he's heard. Errol feels relief because of his genius scholar act is working. The two of them end up grinding all day, every day, from sunrise to sunset. As they dig into their research, Errol figures out that you can harden iron by throwing in some eggshells or bone ash. He shares this discovery with Demon, and they keep making progress. Later on, Errol learns how to extract lead and other stuff. He also notices that, aside from some special metals and medicines in this world, everything else is pretty much the same as what he remembers from his past lives. He talks about how lucky it is that the rules haven't changed. Demon hears him and asks what he meant, but Errol tells him that he was just talking to himself. With everything going according to plan, Errol sends a letter to the king asking for more alchemists. The king doesn't waste time and agrees, telling his men to gather the best alchemists in the kingdom. But there's a teensy tiny problem. One of the king's advisors kinda hesitates, cause he's worrying about complaints over the budget, but the king shuts that off immediately. He trusts Errol's work will be worth it and good for the kingdom. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom, Errol says he's going to create a carbonated drink, a soda. The alchemists are surprised and ask if he's seriously planning to make food. Our boy happily says that's exactly what he's doing. He starts explaining some basics, but before he could get too far, the alchemists start feeling disappointed. They came here hoping to achieve big things and bring honor to their families, only to end up making snacks. One alchemist even complains about giving up his cushy, huge professor job at the Alchemy Academy just to get turned into chef's apprentice. To calm them down, our boy promises they'll be well paid no matter how things turn out. That does the trick, and the alchemists start tossing around ideas. First, they figure they need carbonated water, which naturally exists in some parts of the kingdom and can be brought in pretty fast. Our boy notices these guys aren't exactly driven by passion. They're just happy as long as they get paid or earn some fame. Still, he knows they'll be useful for speeding up his research. A few days later, wagons loaded with barrels of carbonated water roll in from all over. This makes our boy very happy, and Demon pops open one of the barrels, but the nasty smell makes him cringe as he asks if they're really supposed to drink this. Errol tells him they need to test if it's drinkable, but after checking the first barrel, he almost gags and decides it's a no-go. The water's an epic fail. He checks the other barrels and yup, they're all terrible. But our boy doesn't lose his cool. He tells everyone they'll have to make artificial carbonated water instead, causing a buzz among the alchemist homies. He hands out papers with some theories, saying that they could crack the problem if they dig into these clues. Seeing how serious this is, Errol reassures them, saying they're the best alchemists around and will figure it out in no time. When he turns to Demon for some backup, his response doesn't exactly scream enthusiasm. These alchemists really are the top-tier brains in Arnesia. Feeling good about things, Errol leaves the room, telling them that messing around with theories and testing stuff should be their happy place, so he won't hover around. Still, he wonders if they can pull this off in just a week, but figures the challenge will only make them work faster. A few days later, Errol is really excited as he tells the alchemists this carbonated water will bring energy to the kingdom and also summon in piles of cash. The alchemists aren't so sure, secretly wondering if it's all dumb hype. But Errol's very surprised when he sees they've already managed to make artificial carbonated water. Our boy grabs a container and is ready to taste it himself. Demon and the others are curious if this stuff will really catch on. The water has a strong kick but no flavor, so they're skeptical. Errol quickly clears it up, explaining it's not meant to be drunk plain, they'll mix it with fruit juice or alcohol. His original dream was to recreate cola, but since he couldn't get the cola fruit, this fizzy alternative would have to do the job like a substitute teacher. To start, Errol squeezes up some lemon juice into the fizzy water and takes a little sip. The taste hits just right, like Goldilocks and the Bear's kinda right, making it completely perfect with so much excitement. He passes it around, and as expected, the alchemists love it too. The sour lemon flavor mixed with the bubbly fizz is a total hit, leaving everyone wanting even more. And just like that, our boy's carbonated soda is born. Word of the drink spreads like wildfire, turning it into such a luxury that the people can't get enough of, even outside the borders of Arnesia. Lord Dement, the Earl of the Northern Territories, can't wrap his head around this soda thing Prince Errol has created. He has to double-check with his servant, who confirms it's all thanks to Errol's lead. The drink has turned into a super fancy luxury item and is making bank for the Arnesia kingdom. There are even wild rumors about carriages stuffed with gold showing up at the concubine's palace every single day. Kicking himself for brushing Errol off on his first birthday and thinking the prince is useless, Lord Dement is full of regret. If only he had backed Errol back then, he could have had a piece of the action. Swearing to never miss out again, he vows to keep a closer eye on things. Fast forward 2 years, and over at the concubine's castle, 16-year-old Princess Kania is showing off her sword moves. After finishing her routine, she nervously asks 10-year-old Prince Errol for his thoughts. Errol, pausing for a moment, tells her she looks super cool and impressive. Her escort pops up too, saying her swordsmanship is flawless. Errol agrees, thinking she's way more skilled than any boy his age. Kanya gets really happy, jumping around and thanking them for their kind words. Watching her bounce with excitement, her escort says they want to take a break, and Errol thinks she looks really cute while being so cheerful. After the training session, Kanya and Errol sit down in the garden for some tea. Kanya brings up all the news about Errol's soda success, saying it has not only helped the palace but also boosted the kingdom's economy. Errol, playing it cool, calls it his duty as a prince. Kanya then tells him of a rumor about him being the perfect son, which has apparently made a lot of people jealous of Lady Rafana. But there's more to this story than just Errol's soda fame. After learning his mom, Rafana, comes from a fallen noble family that used to run a small territory and has been living like regular dudes, Errol decides to hand over the soda distribution to her family. This turns out to be a genius move, as people aren't just buying a bottle or two. They are lining up to grab crates of soda. The demands are higher than the Grimace shake. Some people are so desperate for the drink that they pay double or even triple the usual price just to get it. On top of soda, Errol also introduces yogurt and another drink to the market, and both become insanely popular. Thanks to all this, Lady Rafana's family goes from being regular nobles to being richer than any merchant in the kingdom. Their house is so packed with gold decorations, from the floors to the ceiling, that it kinda blinds anyone who tries to walk through it. Rumors are spreading like wildfire, and soon people start comparing Prince Errol's successes to Princess Kania's efforts. This leaves Kania super frustrated and upset. She is so annoyed she ends up in tears, begging Errol to tone things down. Errol just laughs at it like it's not a big deal. Trying to change the topic, he offers her some soda and waffles covered in his syrup, assuring her that he can spoil her with the treat. But Kania isn't interested in snacks. Instead, she whips out her sword and tells him exactly what she thinks his problem is. What good is all that money if he doesn't even know how to fight? As she points her sword right at him, she says that she is going to teach him how to handle a blade. Errol, clearly unimpressed, thanks her but says no, explaining he has no interest in being a swordsman in this life. He remembers his past, where he had lived the life of a warrior before, but Kania isn't about to let him off easy. She immediately launches a surprise attack, showing him some sword techniques while pushing him to fight back. Errol sighs, realizing it will be faster to just go along with her. He figures if he plays along, it might help her achieve her dream of raising a family full of swordmasters. Despite looking really delicate, Kania has a ton of energy and passion, and our boy decides to use his chi bit by bit, brick by brick, deciding to help her reach her goal. A few days later, Errol finds himself riding in a massive carriage on the way to see the king. He admires how huge it is, joking in his mind that it's like riding in a Lamborghini. The attention it gets from people makes him feel like some kind of celebrity. Leaning back and relaxing, Errol wonders what the king wants to talk about this time. He suspects it might involve a bonus or some extra allowance as a reward for his achievements. When he arrives, Errol joins the king for lunch, curious about what's next. He remembers how the quiet used to make him uneasy, but now he is used to it. Sitting alone, he calmly eats his meal, waiting for the king to speak. Lately, he has been visiting the king more often. Just as Errol is about to bite into a cookie, he nearly chokes when the king asks if he has thought about taking on a real government job. After clearing his throat, our boy realizes the moment he has been avoiding has pilled up. The king says it might feel a little early, but no one would oppose if Errol starts working in the government. He then asks what he thinks and if there is any specific job that he might want. Trying to stay composed, Errol tells him that he doesn't have any preferences, though deep down, all he really wants is to relax, eat, and enjoy life. He sips his tea, hoping to not blow it all completely, and tells the king he doesn't see why he should think about work now, especially since he is still busy with science and alchemy. Keeping his poker face, Errol waits as the king sits silently. In his mind, our boy wonders why the king wants him to take on a role when the first prince isn't even involved in government yet. He thinks about the queen, and the first prince staying quiet, and how he has always been careful not to cross any lines with them. He also feels lucky that the last big ball has been cancelled thanks to the chaos caused by the freak prince. Ain't no ball like a prince ball. Errol knows being liked by the king is one thing, but being trusted with a big government role is something else entirely. He dislikes gossip and doesn't want to get caught up in any drama with his brothers. Was the king trying to stir up trouble between them on purpose? Errol feels that this might be the case. He thinks about how survival isn't just about being clever or strong in the wild. It applies to royal life too. To sit on the throne, you need the strength and sharp instincts of an eagle. Without that, even all the knowledge from his past lives wouldn't be enough to stay safe. Maybe the king wants a world where only the strongest survive. Either way, Errol isn't about to fall into the trap this time. A few days pass since Prince Errol talks with the king. Now, he is riding a horse, looking excited as he thinks about how this is his first time going so far from the concubine's palace. And it's not on a toy horse this time, it's the real thing. The wind hits his face, and he feels free like never before. He thinks he deserves this breath of fresh air after all the time he spent working hard and staying indoors. He remembers the times he used to explore everywhere, even across worlds, just to find strong people to challenge. But today, he's happy just enjoying this horse ride. Then Kania calls out, telling him to slow down, kinda impressed by how well he rides. In his head, he thanks her for taking him along, but out loud, he says it's all because the horse is smart, not him. He looks back, wondering why so many knights are escorting them for such a short trip. He notices some of them look pretty tough. Kania tells him that she didn't ask for this many guards, but before she finishes, Errol cuts in, reminding her she's a princess. Safety definitely has to come first, even if it means losing a bit of freedom. Suddenly, our boy feels something strange coming from in front of them up ahead. It's like a weird, heavy energy. He stops his horse and wonders if it's some kind of magic. His sister asks why he stopped, and he tells her they should turn back because he thinks there might be monsters in the forest. Kania looks confused and asks how he knows. And our boy makes up a stupid reason about having a strong sixth sense and says the feeling is bad, like a trap is waiting. Kania doesn't believe him, of course, and immediately charges toward the strange energy. Shocked, Errol yells for the knights to make sure she comes back safely. One of the knights awkwardly admits they are actually on the right path. Turns out just beyond the forest is the princess's training ground. Errol is confused and asks about this training ground, but in the end, he just follows his sister, who seems completely sure of where she's going. This whole thing started a few days ago. It all just kinda happened when Kania and Errol were out here eating together with no danger. Kania told him about Trip soon and invited him to tag along. She totally understands how annoying it is to be stuck in the palace all the time and talks about how much she loves hunting and going on adventures. As they ride side by side, Kania tells him that traveling is practice, and practice is traveling. It's all just fun for her. Errol, though, feels like this is more of a punishment than anything else. Kania looks over at him and says she's pretty sure he would have come along even if it was just for practice, because he trusts her. And since she's his sister, she promises to protect him if they run into any monsters. Errol doesn't say much, he just smiles, thinking about how awesome she is. Soon they reach the training ground. Errol gets right into planning mode, laying out the strategy. Some troops will lead the monsters to one side, Kania will break through, and the rest of the team will handle the ones caught in the trap. The goal is to make the best use of their time and energy while letting Kania show off her skills. The plan kicks off, and the guards round up 20 orcs for Kania to fight. She grabs her sword, rushes at them, and takes down the first orc with a slash to its neck. She sends another flying with a quick slash. Errol watches, kind of doubting at first that she'd even take one down during her first try. But as he keeps watching, he has to admit she's got serious skills. He's a little jealous, of course, and rightly so, but mostly impressed by how strong and calm she looks while fighting. Kania doesn't stop, going from one orc to the next, increasing her kill count. Kania's skills leave everyone hyped, watching her pull off amazing moves for a 16-year-old. The training keeps going for a few days, and she just keeps showing off how talented she is. One night, they're chilling by a fireplace. Errol asks if she's tired, but Kania says she's good and even wishes she could have fought more. Errol tells her not to push herself too hard, reminding her how people mess up when they let their guard down. He even brings up a mistake from his past life that cost him big. As they hang out, Kania is busy raving about how good the meat skewer tastes. Errol watches her and thinks how, at that moment, she just looks like any regular 16-year-old girl. But then, as the night goes on, he suddenly asks why she wants to be so strong. Kania is surprised but answers seriously. She says that no matter how skilled she gets, nobody will actually support her choices because she's a princess. People think it's just a phase, and one day she'll quit all this sword stuff, settle down, and marry some random guy for politics. Errol gets it. In their world, it's totally normal for princesses to have arranged marriages for the sake of alliances. Kania is already at that age where people expect it. But before Errol can say anything, Kania interrupts his thoughts. She straight up says she hates that life. Errol is surprised, but she explains how much she admires him. He's out there doing what he's good at, earning respect, and making money while helping the kingdom. She wants the same thing. She wants people to see her for her skills, not just as someone who'll marry for politics. With a determined look, Kania says that she'll control her own life. Errol smiles, impressed, and confidently tells her she's definitely going to change her destiny. Kania smiles back, saying she wants to be like him. Then she remembers their journey ends tomorrow. Errol agrees. This trip has been amazing, and he's glad he came along. The next day, Kania is still out there taking down orcs like it's some kind of personal vendetta. When one orc charges at her, Kania wastes no time and slashes it clean across the torso, dropping it instantly. Everyone watching is amazed. She keeps hunting orcs, even on the way home, like she's on some kind of unstoppable rampage. The orcs that were trying to hide don't stand a chance and get caught easily. Errol eventually yells out to her, telling her it's time to stop. He points out that there's nothing left to fight and they really need to get back home. Kania looks around, sees she's surrounded by a pile of defeated orcs, and finally agrees to call it a day. But then she notices her horse looking rough, like really rough. It's worn out from all the action and looks like it needs a break ASAP. Errol says they should ride together on his horse while her tired one gets sent to the magicians for some magical stuff. Kania hops on and takes the reins, since, let's be real, she's the better rider anyway. And our boy's totally fine with that. They start heading home with the guards following close behind. Everything seems fine at first, but of course, that doesn't last. Errol feels something's off and looks up at the sky. Kania asks him what's wrong, but he can't explain it, just has a bad feeling. He focuses his chi to try and figure out what's up. Then he spots it, a wyvern. Errol freaks out and quickly grabs the horse, telling Kania to hang on tight. He's ready to make a run for it. Turning to the guards behind them, he shouts, warning them about the wyvern, and tells them to get into the woods for safety. The guards can't believe it and think it's nonsense. They picked this spot because the local lord, who loves hunting wyverns, swore there were none around. Then things go south fast. Someone raises the alarm, and just like that, a massive wyvern dives down, snatches a guard like a toy, and flies off with him. Everyone loses it. People are yelling and running everywhere, completely shocked to see the very monster they thought didn't exist here. Prince Errol keeps it together and takes charge, while Princess Kania looks back nervously to see what's going on. That's when it hits her. There isn't just one wyvern. There's a whole flock of them. Errol sees it too and is super confused. Wyverns usually prefer to be loners, but now they're acting like some organized death squad. These creatures aren't just hunting, they're wiping everyone out for the fun of it. What really throws him off is that they're using crazy magic like acid breath, making them even more dangerous. Behind Errol and Kania, the scene is pure chaos. The ground looks like a battlefield where Hope went to die. Kania stares at the guards getting wiped out, but Errol tells her to focus and hold on to him tighter. Right then, one of the wyverns locks onto them and starts chasing, charging up its acid breath to unleash on them. Out of nowhere, a mage steps up and saves the day, blasting the wyvern's attack away with a fireball. The group of magicians at the back jump in to cover Errol and Kania, throwing spells left and right to clear a path. But Errol knows the truth. They can't just keep running forever. This fight isn't over yet. Wyverns are tough to crack unless you've got some real magical skills. Anything below class 4 might as well just be throwing rocks at them. The magicians are giving it their all, but it's clear that they're about to hit their limit. With 2 wyverns closing in fast, our boy doesn't waste time. He converts his mana into a deadly projectile, call it a spirit bullet or Ganjidong sniper, and nails one wyvern right in the head. Then he takes out the other, no sweat, and lets the mages bask in the glory like they did all the work. But out of nowhere, a wyvern crashes down in front of them, cutting off their escape route. Just as things are about to get ugly, Kania calls out for her mom in a pure panic mode. Her personal guard shows up with Superman's timing, slicing the wyvern clean in half with one swing of her sword. The guard doesn't stick around to celebrate, though. She tells our boy and his sis to make a run for it to the woods for safety. Errol feels relief and is impressed by her skills, hoping she might buy them some breathing room. But before he could even relax, he hears a strange voice in his head, almost taunting him. Errol looks around fast, trying to figure out where that creepy vibe is coming from. Then a dark-robed man steps into view, holding some weird stick and laughing like he's auditioning for Evil Villain of the Year. Errol's instincts scream trouble. Well, obviously, just as he tries to size the guy up, the mage skips introductions and starts summoning magic like it's about to go down. This catches our boy off guard as he expected an answer, and not for him to whip out the 9 and start blasting. The dark mage launches his attack, but Errol is quick, dodging and shielding Kania. Sadly, the guards behind them aren't so lucky. Once the magic stops, Errol looks back and sees the guards down, with smoke still rising from their lifeless bodies. The dark mage comments on how Kania dodged the attack, sounding surprised. Errol is taken aback when he realizes the mage knows her name and starts to wonder if she's been the real target all along. With a creepy laugh, the dark mage makes fun of them, saying they were just entertainment for him. He raises his staff, getting ready to cast another spell, and claims they can't escape. Our boy can sense dark energy coming from the staff. Both Kania and Errol feel uneasy. Kania looks around and notices something strange happening to the fallen bodies. One of the guards yells that they're moving, and even the wyvern is starting to twitch. Errol realizes they're up against the undead. The dark mage orders the undead to take out Kania and show the royal family the power of the dark church. But then he pauses, sensing something's wrong, though he can't tell what. Arl won't just stand there while his sister is in danger. Determined, he wonders who would dare target Kania. Using his Danjigong, he shoots at the dark mage's chest, hitting him with a wave of attacks that make the mage scream and collapse. Kania, confused, asks what happened. Errol explains that the mage probably overloaded himself with magic, causing a backlash. Even though the dark mage is down, the spell on the undead is still active. The guards urge Errol and Kania to run, promising to take care of the undead. Before they leave, Errol tells the guards he trusts them to finish the fight. As night falls, they flee into the forest and find shelter under a cliff, setting up camp. Kania is still worried, but Errol reassures her that the undead will be gone soon now that the dark mage is defeated. Errol tells Kania not to worry, saying the guards are on their way and everything will be fine. As he tries to start a fire, Kania asks how he learned to do that, since he's always busy at the castle. Errol gets a bit nervous and explains it's all about rubbing two flammable things together to create heat. If Kania hadn't been watching him so closely, Errol would have just used his mana to create heat and avoid the hassle of using his hands. After a bit of struggling, he finally gets the fire fired up. Kania wonders if maybe she should have skipped the training, but our boy tells her that it wasn't her fault, just an unexpected mess. She then asks if he was scared during the whole thing. Realizing he's been acting way too serious, our boy decides to be more honest. He admits they're royal representatives and have to hide their fear, even though the wyverns were pretty terrifying. Kania, seeing a softer side of him, takes his hand and thanks him for sticking with her through all the chaos. Errol, feeling quite in the moment, says that Kania was scared from the start, and it broke his heart to see the guards lose their lives for nothing. He knows the royal family is always in danger of assassination, but this is Kania's first real encounter with danger, and it's tough for her to handle. Still, he stays focused on the main goal, getting them both home safe. Out of nowhere, a wild battle breaks out above them between a wyvern and a griffin. Kania wonders why they're fighting at this hour. And Errol, noticing a nest on the cliff, figures the wyvern is after the griffin's cub. The wyvern manages to sink its teeth into the griffin's neck, sending it crashing into the rocks below. Errol and Kania run to quickly get out of the way, dodging falling rocks. Once the dust clears, they see the wyvern fly off, probably scared off by the griffin's blood on the air. But when Errol looks around, Kania is gone. He's left standing there, shocked. He spots her near the fallen griffin and warns her to be careful, but she says it's fine since the griffin is already dead. Errol knows there's no stopping Kania when she's curious. She looks at the griffin and wonders what they should do with it. Our boy, feeling kinda awkward, asks if she's planning to bury it, but Kania surprises him by saying she's worried about the griffin's baby. Errol says they can't do anything, and they would have to let nature handle it, even if it seems harsh. Kania, though, thinks Errol meant they should raise the baby together, leaving Errol even more confused and all. As Kania spots the guards coming, one of them looks relieved to see the pair safe. When they get closer, Kania happily greets them, excited to see them again. Kania's guard says that no one else was hurt after the undead magic spell was broken. The guards are surprised when they see Kania holding a griffin in her arms. Prince Errol, looking a bit nervous, says it's the perfect time to step in and stop Kania from taking in the griffin. But Kania's guard says it's too late for that. A week has passed, and things have mostly gone back to normal, except for the new addition to the family. When the griffin baby flies over and wakes up Prince Errol, he greets the newest member of their family. Errol picks up the little griffin, and though he can't just sleep like he used to, he forgives the baby for being so cute and well-behaved. The story then goes back to that night. Errol tells the guards to take Kania to rest while he makes sure no wild animals will disturb the fallen griffin's body. As the guards set up camp, Errol carefully cuts open the griffin's chest with his sword and takes out its magical core. Errol knows the core will help him tame the newborn griffin. While Errol plays with the cub, he sees Kania arriving at the castle. She quickly gets out of her carriage, and the griffin baby excitedly greets her. As Kania spends time with the cub, Prince Errol hears about a wanted order across the kingdom. A bounty is placed on the Dark Church, the group behind the attack on Kania, with rewards for anyone who knows where they are. Prince Errol notes that the Dark Church isn't the only group causing trouble for the kingdom. He suddenly wonders if he's been too focused on wealth. A guard, overhearing him, asks what he means, but Errol just sends him away like it doesn't matter one bit. As Princess Kania finally catches the griffin, Errol thinks about why someone would target her, considering she doesn't hold much power or influence. Still, she's a princess and part of his family. He starts thinking that maybe he should become a sword master and try to become an aura expert by the time he's in his late 20s. Errol, trying his best to change the topic, approaches Kania and asks if she wants to do something fun. Kania asks what he has in mind, and moments later, swords are clashing, and some mana kinda appears around their blades. Kania notices the surge and starts to think about it, but before she could finish, they both pull back after one last strike. Kania excitedly asks how she did, and Errol happily tells her he used his aura. He secretly enjoys how well his plan worked and how she bought it. She asks him if she could learn it too, and wonders where Errol studied it. He vaguely replies, saying something like that, then explains that using aura mostly relies on the brain. Kania, a bit discouraged, assumes she can't do it because she's not smart enough. Errol reassures her, saying that's not the case. Kania jokes that it's just because he's a genius, but Errol explains that she just needs to learn how to control the aura with her brain, and he'll teach her. Excited, Kania asks if she'll be able to master it quickly. Errol tells Kania that if she follows his method, she'll master aura quickly. Secretly, he thinks about why her progress is so fast. He's been quietly transferring mana into her. He tells her to focus and follow his guidance. Meanwhile, Kania's guard eavesdrops on their conversation from behind closed doors. Weeks pass, and whenever Kania visits Fly, she trains in both swordsmanship and aura with Errol. Kania becomes an aura user at an amazing speed. One day, while looking at her sword she asks if this is the power of aura. Errol congratulates her but reminds her that this is just the start of her journey. One unexpected result of their training is that Fly temporarily grows after being exposed to the strong energy from aura practice. Fly rests on Errol's shoulder, and he complains about the griffin's weight, even if it shrinks back down. Errol tells Kania that mastering aura is only the first step. They need to train harder to control their strength, movement, and use aura to its fullest. Kania may even be able to use aura while riding Fly. She laughs at Errol's bold imagination, but he insists he's serious. While petting Fly, Kania asks if Errol is right. In his mind, Errol believes that day will come soon. Suddenly the door opens, and a voice announces that His Majesty has arrived, surprising both Errol and Kania. Errol wonders why the king is there, as he should be busy with his preparations in the north and not just stopping by for a breath of fresh air. The king enters with Lady Rafana, and our boy respectfully greets him. The king says that he's heard they've been practicing swordsmanship lately. Errol downplays their training, saying it's been minimal, and that he's mostly been working on experiments and trying to tame the griffin for border defense. The king seems pleased, wanting to see Errol's progress in different areas. Just then, two servants bring in a large chest. They set it down, and both Errol and Kania are surprised by what's inside. With a serious expression, the king tells Errol to try the sword. It's a special weapon made just for him. Lady Rafana protests, saying Errol's too young to use such a sword. But the king laughs, saying he doesn't expect Errol to wield it yet. He just wants Errol to touch it as its owner. Errol casually picks up the sword, shocking everyone. As he holds it, Errol wonders if it's time to take swordsmanship more seriously from now on. The king is surprised about Errol's interest in the sword that was gifted to him and figures he might have some potential in swordsmanship. But all that potential goes when Errol falls over with the sword and figures that he should probably abandon swordsmanship in his current life. Since he's already good at other things, learning the sword will only put him in the battle royale that is the struggle for the throne. So he has to act as the weak little brother, even when he's training. He can't let his effort go to waste, so he thanks his father for the gift, but mentions that swords aren't his thing. So he suggests that the sword should be given to Kania instead. She has a load of potential and has been improving pretty fast. I mean, her skill even gives other knights second thoughts about their jobs. Seeing Errol's decision, the king accepts this on the condition that Kania should show that she is worthy of the sword. This sudden decision shocks Kania and Errol. But Errol remembers that the king is also pretty strong as a swordsman. So, a duel has pretty much been declared, and all Kania has to do is swing her sword. Even with that, Kania begins to panic. So Errol pats her on the back and encourages her to display her skills to her father and probably beat up an old man. So the two of them prepare for the showdown, and the king notices that her stance is different from the classic knights. Just from that, he already knows that she is going to use an enhanced sword technique. With that, the duel officially begins, and Kana dashes towards her father at a very fast speed thanks to her physical strength and explosive mana. But Errol wonders if it really is the best idea to attack the head first, plus they are using real swords. Instead, the king stands there and smiles like the Chad he is before defending against Kania's attack. She is shocked by this, seeing that her opponent is also using aura. The king commends her blow but still deflects her to the floor like it's nothing. He is impressed with the fight his daughter put up since he's got to use aura on a level that he hasn't used even on people like knight captains. This makes me wonder how strong the kingdom's military actually is. But anyway, Kania figures that she still has much to learn. The king mentions the fact that Errol has been teaching Kania, and he was using a different way of teaching since the normal method wasn't working for her. With that said, the king asks if Errol can teach his method to others. Errol, on the other hand, realizes that his father actually wants to create an unstoppable army of aura experts using his training method, but there is no way he's going to teach them. So, Errol apologizes and explains that it will be difficult to achieve the same results with Kana since she already had potential from the start. Plus, he has been observing her ever since they were together. So that's how she was able to improve so quickly. But the truth is, it doesn't take much observation to come up with a suitable training method, and he would rather do anything than scar his eyes looking at a bunch of macho knights. Even with the disappointing news, Errol still wishes to give his father some hope. So he decides to share an improved training schedule but mentions that it's only for royalty, since sharing a secret training method with the other aristocrats will only mean trouble. So the king eventually agrees to his condition, and Errol is honored that his training technique will now be passed down to different generations in the royal family. But still, he laughs at the fact that the training they will pass through will be something else entirely. A few months later, the king is training, and a couple of maids witness the chaos. From how he's wrecked training dummies and the entire room itself, he finds the training method to be effective and has even reached the last stage as an aura expert. Unfortunately, Errol cannot use the training program because of his weak body, and the king believes he needs the training more than anyone else. So he decides to do something about it. Later on, Errol has some tea with Kania and is shocked when he learns that he will be assigned a personal guard. There are tons of people who volunteered for the position. Errol takes a look at the applications. He knows that most of the knights there are big shots. Errol feels accomplished about how his reputation has really improved, but he doesn't see the need of having a bodyguard. But he doesn't want to show off his powers or what happened the last time to repeat itself. So he gets to pick a maximum of 3 bodyguards. While he goes through the documents, he decides to do interviews so he can take their skills, character, and traits into account. As the cultured individual he is, Errol doesn't need a million IQ to know that he would want the ladies to be his guards. However, the others do not know what he has in mind. With that, he finally leaps onto the table and decides to get the plan moving. When it's time for the interviews, Errol begins to wonder what he has just signed up for. Even though they are most likely quality knights, they are definitely not the slender damsels he imagined them to be. I mean, you can't blame them. They've probably spent all their lives training. So Errol puts his wishes away and starts the interview. He takes a look at all of the ladies, and they all look strong enough to fold him 8 times while they state their reasons for applying to be his guard. He takes a look at them, including this one guard that makes the king look like a lost child. As the interviews go on, Errol spots one noble-looking knight who has a much different aura compared to the other knights. So far, the interview has been going well, so Errol asks all the candidates to wait outside while he makes a decision. When everyone leaves, he casually uses a chi technique that gives him Albert Einstein-level IQ. Normally, it would take decades to master, but he casually casts it as the master of isekais that he is. After that, he tells the knights to come in one at a time for the next stage of the interviews. He is sure that some of the knights have other plans in mind, so he wants to find who's sus among them. Using his technique, he picks out the knights that appear to be suspicious. His technique, clairvoyance, allows him to see the color of their souls and emotions. Fortunately, they don't have any plans to assassinate Errol, but just to spy on him. The next candidate comes up, and the color of her soul is crystal clear. So clear that even Errol is dumbfounded. The knight's name is Asha Fernil, and my guy has finally found a perfect candidate. At this point, Asha is pretty much top of the line, but he still needs to pick out 2 other knights. He considers picking that one buff lady from earlier since her color was also clear. Suddenly, another knight steps in. She introduces herself as Sena Garil, the last candidate. Errol also notes that her energy is clear as well, and it doesn't take a genius to know that she is a lively person. Looking at her past experience, Errol points out how she's been in almost every order of knights in the kingdom, and even been dispatched to distant territories. But still, he can tell from her color that she hasn't done anything wrong. So, he can forget about why she has been transferred so often. With that, Errol concludes the interview and announces his choices. He presents his 2 choices, Asha and Sena. The new recruits join the palace, and they are off to a good start in their job, but he still wants to make an improvement. He brings them to some place and reveals that he wants them to demonstrate their skills to him. Since they are his personal guards, he wants them to be the very best that no one ever was. To demonstrate their skills, Errol asks them to have a duel with each other, and they agree with this idea. Like the mastermind that he is, He figures that holding a sparring match between two people of similar skill means that they can go all out. So to make sure things remain intense, he mentions that he is curious to see who is stronger, as if he hasn't thought of this plan like how someone like Aizen does his things. That statement struck a nerve in both of them since true knights are sure to be proud of their skills. The tension gets heated between them just as Errol planned, and they also are curious to see who is the top dog. Meanwhile, Errol is pumped to watch the epic showdown that is about to unfold, so he sits back to enjoy the show. Before the duel begins, the knights ask if there are any rules to follow as they prepare themselves. They look eager to win, but Errol continues to stuff his face and mentions that they can do anything they want as long as they don't go overboard. With that in mind, the fighters prepare for their epic duel. Errol notes the intense mood between the two of them, and he believes that they are going to fight for real. So he tries warning them again. So Errol claps his hands to signal the start of the match, and Bro is launched away. Even though he told them not to go overboard, he understands that's how knights pretty much are. Now it's to watch the fight unfold. Asha lunges in with her spear, and Sena spots this move. She punches Asha's spear out of the way like a feral beast. With a grin, Sena has found the perfect chance. She closes into Asha to give a punch that will end Asha's career early. Since Asha uses a spear, it will be difficult for her to respond. My guy is still munching away on his popcorn and wonders if she has anything up her sleeve. Luckily she does. She kicks Sena's fist away, which causes her to retreat. Errol, who is still watching the duel, figures that they are being a bit too serious. He can tell that their aura is getting too powerful, and they'll probably execute each other before they can stop. So Errol stops the match. He now has an understanding of their skills and can set up a few improvements. From his observations, he notes that Asha is impatient because she focuses too much on speed, and Sena hesitates a little since he mainly throws hands. Basically, one is too fast and the other is too slow. After the remarks, Asha recalls that he helped Kana improve, so she figures that he asked for a demonstration of their skills to help them improve. Apparently, her improvement has become famous among the knights, and Errol also wants his guards to improve just like that. So he leads the both of them to begin their special training session. On the first stage, they are going to be learning theory stuff about mana. Errol presents his signature manual and plans to start a business if it works out well. However, there is no hope that they'll ever understand the book they are reading. And there goes the chance of making a New York Times bestseller. In the end, Errol decides to explain things himself to his two guards concerning mana, including what could happen if aura is misused, how to use it more effectively, and whatever. With that explanation out of the way, Errol suggests that what they need to do next is to absorb the mana that exists all around nature so they can learn how to use it efficiently. He guarantees that learning that is enough to completely change how they use aura. After the lecture, Errol decides to give his guards custom lessons for another part of the training. Errol begins with Sena to teach her how to focus aura better. She mentions that she is already capable of forming aura easy enough. Errol asks her to spread her aura to all her limbs at the same time, an epic fail. Normally, it is not hard to cover the entire body in aura, but that will quickly exhaust the user. So people usually focus it on areas they need. Sena fails to perform the task, and mentions that her senses will become unstable if she focuses on too many places at once. So Errol puts his palms together with hers and shows her a trick to focus aura. And just like that, she manages to channel her aura to both of her hands. Now that Sena has been sorted out, next on the list is Asha. Errol tells her that she is too impatient since she tried to resort to hand-to-hand combat against an opponent who is skilled in that aspect. An obvious mistake. So she has to learn how to remain composed, which explains why she's carrying Errol for her training. He wants her to focus and not pay any attention to anything that is bothering her. So basically, he just wants her to stock up on it is what it is energy. While all that's going on, Queen Elia receives a letter about what Errol has been up to. She originally left him alone since someone as insignificant as him didn't bother her, but now, he's becoming a problem. So, she burns up the letter and finally decides to do something about him. Then there's Asha, who can notice a difference in her strength after following the prince's guidance. After all, this is Errol's training we're talking about here. Even though it appears pointless, the innocent tree that has been shattered is enough to testify to her increase in strength. In a bit of background check, we learn that Asha was a daughter of House Fernil, a family that wasn't very wealthy and lived in a small countryside region. Because of a famine, monsters attacked them and everything went downhill pretty much from there. What's even worse is that the aristocrats who kept in contact with House Fernil abandoned them. In the end, Asha joined the knights to make ends meet. The good news is that she was talented in combat, so she quickly awakened her aura and was stationed in the royal capital. But the bad news is that she was placed in the order with the worst knights. Even the captain wasn't worth calling a captain. Even with how old he is, he's still an aura beginner and only had his position because of a few officials who were fortunate to put him there. This memory doesn't sit well with Asha, so she takes out her aggression on an innocent tree and plans to make her captain resemble the tree the next time she spots him. She applied to be a personal guard out of desperation, but who knew she would get chosen at the very first moment? Luckily, her family is living much better now thanks to Errol, but her current goal is to save up a bit of cash so she can send her little brother to the academy. In the end, she aims to repay Errol thanks to his kindness to her so far. On the other hand, Sena prepares to work out since she is just not sure of how else to do things. Her family has worked as mercenaries for generations. She was raised in a tribe of mercenaries who do not belong to any nation. After the war with the Empire 30 years ago, the mercenary business began to look a bit sour. So Sena was asked to go into the world so she could start a new life for herself. She didn't see any issue with leaving her village or training as a knight. But her main shock came when she heard her father was killed by an evil feudal lord. Just like her father, she was pretty much a classified idiot. Like how she would beat the living daylights out of a fellow knight for accusing villagers of stealing and killing them just to get promoted. And honestly, she doesn't regret that moment a single bit. It felt great if anything. Then she just got passed around and ended up getting sent to dangerous areas. After the endless roaming, she eventually applied as a personal guard and then got to know Errol. She has a good feeling about working with him and is very grateful for it. With the background checks out of the way, the two knights head to begin their job for the day. As for Errol, he doesn't seem to have much of a talent in combat, but his skill is unmatched when it comes to learning. He's a certified businessman who brought wealth to the kingdom by selling products, and even helped Kana to become an aura expert, using a theory he developed himself. Of course, his reputation as the young gray sage who does nothing is well deserved. At a meeting, the king and a few other officials discuss the fact Errol will be 14 soon, and the coming-of-age ceremony that will follow. One official suggests that the ceremony will be a good opportunity for Errol since he's using his talents in multiple fields, adding something else about some territories being available. The king gets the hint that they're pretty much saying that they should give a territory to Errol. Obviously, he is angry with this, since it is just an excuse to banish him. It turns out Errol's reputation has spread all the way to different countries, and the speculations that the king will make him the heir to the throne. But the king wasn't having any of that, so he slams his aura-charged fist on the table. He has made up his mind that his heir will be the crown prince. Plus, he already knows that Errol has no interest in the crown. Another official speaks up. He mentions that rumors have already begun to spread, so people are beginning to pay less attention to the crown prince. The duke warns him about something concerning the former king, but the king rises from his seat and silences him. Someone comes over with a bunch of documents from other aristocrats who all share the same opinion. They are all concerned with the imbalance within the royal family. The king takes a look at the appeals, and each one of them says the same thing. So it turns out they will have to exile Errol. In defeat, the king acknowledges the concerns and has no choice but to take action. Errol learns what happened in the meeting through a note. He tosses the note aside and he already knows that he's being exiled even with how nicely it is put. However, that is pretty much the best news Errol has had. He is excited to get his own territory. It turns out making himself stand out has finally paid off, and couldn't care less about the aristocrats. Finally, Errol can now make his dream fortress. Well, he is excited until he learns that the aristocrats assigned him to the northern territory of Fahilia. It is a place where snow falls all year round, and the ground is too barren to even farm anything. So, Errol decides that he will leave a month after the coming-of-age ceremony, giving him a year and a month to finish preparations. Since being independent in a different territory is a major task, he expects those who are really prepared to join him. He will find different roles for those who stay back, but he expects those who follow him to move quickly. As the crowd leaves, Errol already figures that the alchemy team and most of the workers are already destined to follow him. Sena has already been ahead of them and was stationed in that area for a year. After all, she gets drafted to different locations like no one's business, and she testifies that the place is extremely cold. With how Sena tries to talk about the location, Errol figures that they might as well be heading for Antarctica with how she's reacting to the place. So much for a nice territory from the ever-loving aristocrats who wanted to exile him. But still, he finds the place to be much better than expected. They could have sent him to a place where surviving for a few seconds will be a world record, so he doesn't find Fahilia to be so bad. Later on, Asha asks why Sena isn't being honest. She knows that Sena was about to say something earlier. Just as she said earlier, Sena explains that the place is pretty cold and empty. Along with being a frozen wasteland, she was actually stationed there to guard against the monsters that can't endure the cold. Asha is more than ready to follow Errol no matter where, but she can't help but wonder if it is okay to follow with that. Sena doesn't see anything to be worried about since she knows that Errol has something up his sleeve. She noticed that he didn't have a look of despair or anything, so she believes that everything will work out. With that said, they finally decide to send a message to their families before they leave. Then there's Errol, who just finished up with his plans. He knows that his mother looks pretty heartbroken even though she hasn't said much. He told the maids not to tell her where he will be stationed, but he can't help but worry about his mother's safety since she'll be alone. Even a princess like Kania got ambushed. So he thinks of a few plans so he can contact her, but eventually decides to think about it later. But for now, he decides to plan the move first. After all, a harsh environment is the perfect place for a reincarnation pro like him to live carefree. He summons a magician, and Feiyan shows up with his disciples. He never expected someone familiar to show up. Either way, he asks him to keep a secret and passes a plan for an item that he would like to be created. Feiyan takes a look at the plan, and he is instantly shocked by what he is seeing. He wonders if Errol drew it, and he did. only that he made a few modifications to an artifact he gave to Kania, but his design will make it twice as effective and reduce production costs by 90%. Of course, this fact is very impressive to Feiyan. Errol asks if he can make it, and Feiyan mentions that it will be possible as long as he has the right materials. But one problem is that he knows the creator of the original artifact, so he doesn't want to make a rip-off of someone's work. Errol notices his hesitation, so he decides to give him a little something to guarantee results. So he hands over several fat bags of cash, and moral ethics has left the chat. The man and his disciples instantly fold and are prepared to work. After witnessing the power having tons of cash has to offer, Errol wonders if it can be finished within a month. Then he takes a look at his current investment and figures that Feiyan could be suitable as his personal magician. Errol learns how fast money can make people work when Feiyan presents the newly created necklace to his boss a few days later. He never expected it to be finished in 10 days, plus the quality is pretty good. However, his workers are obviously overworked. Since Errol likes it, he suggests that they start mass production. As Feiyan asks how many, one of the workers prays that it is only 5. But I guess they aren't going to get any form of sleep when Errol uses 50, and that's just the starting point. With that, they head off to slavery. I mean work. Errol already understands their pain, but dying 100 times still seems bad enough. For the next step, Errol heads out with Asha in a carriage. She wonders where they are headed and suggests that he could have sent someone for the errand, but he insists to pick things up by himself this time around. Errol eventually reveals that they are headed to a slave market, and Asha is obviously shocked at this information. She figures that he has probably gone mad with power already, but Errol tries to convince her that there is an explanation. Asha gets an idea that her boss might be starting up cotton fields with this one, or probably coal mines or something. But Errol knows that there is no way he's like that. At least that's what we think. With how far she took her imagination, Asha apologizes for it since that's not how Errol works. Normally, when you imagine a slave market, you'd think of a place that could be worse than hell or something like that. You know, shattered dreams, endless torment, fate worse than death, stuff like that. But in reality, at least in this novel, it is surprisingly pretty tame. Even Errol is shocked about this. Of course, it would be a shame if one random slave caught some strange disease and spread it around, which explains why it is very neat. A person comes by and reveals the place to be the best slave market in the capital. He welcomes Errol and introduces himself as Ian, the manager of the establishment. He shows his Errol and Asha around the place and explains about the slave market that is completely legal, by the way. The people who become slaves are people who must have either failed to pay up taxes or belong to families that were destroyed. A person doesn't immediately become a slave after any of these, but at least there's a lower chance of starving if they become a slave. Then there are the criminals, but Ian suggests that there is no need for Errol to pay them any attention. Errol notices that Ian is filtering out the criminal slaves since he is royalty, but it is still fine for Errol either way. Finally, Ian takes a seat in his office and asks Errol for what he might need. He needs a large number of slaves. Ian asks how many he would need, and Errol says he needs 150, a number that shocks Ian. Errol wonders if the number he mentioned is too much to handle, but Ian can handle it since the place also has other branches outside the capital. He can't help but wonder why Errol needs that many, but the young prince assures him that he won't do anything bad with them. Yet. Also, he lets him know that he would like slaves who are familiar with each other in groups of at least 4. While that is a pretty difficult request, it isn't unusual for groups to become slaves all at once. With a snap, piles of documents are brought in. Errol has a look at some of these documents and needs slaves who can read and write. Plus, he also asks for them to be transported to a certain location. With negotiations done, Errol asks Asha to unveil the goods that make every businessman drool on the floor. Now things are pretty much guaranteed for Errol as he is instantly promoted to top VVIP customer. On the way back, Asha wonders what Errol needs the slaves for since having hundreds of them isn't something anyone can do on a casual Friday night. Errol reveals that he wants to make them residents of his new territory. In addition, he is going to give his new mana necklace thing to the slaves and educate each of them from there. Asha never expected that to be his plan, so she can drop all the weird thoughts now. Errol plans to transform the terrain from a frozen wasteland to a dream kingdom. I mean, he just wants to live life comfortably. Everything he's doing now is just to live the best lazy life ever. He will also nurture the ones who will work in Fahilia and build the greatest paradise anyone has ever seen. One morning, Errol lies on his bed thinking about all the preparations he has to make to get independent and the fact he has to say goodbye to everyone he loves. Then there's a knock on the door, and it's his mother. She rushes over to give her son a hug. She suggests trying to talk with the king about the relocation once again, but Errol tells her not to worry and promises to visit often. Even with the fact he has a year left to go, his mom is still sad that he will have to go. Then a maid comes over to carry her away. Errol doesn't want to reveal his new location to his mother until he has settled down, and will definitely put her mind at ease when the time comes. It's a peaceful afternoon. Well, it was until a knight gets casually launched into orbit. A few other knights tremble in fear at a person. It turns out that person is Kania, who is incredibly angry. She calls for her next victim and tells them to come at her with everything they have or they may not see the next day. She is angry about the fact of Errol being sent away. She understands the whole situation surrounding him, but still can't help but get angry about it. But more importantly, she is upset that he never told her anything for the past 6 months. Then she launches another poor knight into a wall. She thinks it's because he can't change his fate, but he actually just forgot. She doesn't plan to let him leave so easily. On the other hand, the knights are terrified at her aura. According to Errol's manual, the mana circulating one's body moves faster if a strong emotion builds up. And just like that, she ended up becoming the youngest swordmaster in the history of the kingdom, and the third one in the world, all thanks to being annoyed by her little brother. Errol thinks about his first life, especially how time flew by when he was in the military. Now he's getting the same feeling as he's preparing to become independent. Errol is finally 14 years old, and his coming-of-age ceremony has begun. He gets greeted by several aristocrats, but on the inside, my guy is dying of heavy boredom. There are even more aristocrats than his first birthday. Back then, he could easily pretend he was asleep, but now there is no escape for him. He is sure that the participants are rejoicing over this ceremony, well, rejoicing that he's getting sent away. Who would care about his well-being? Anyway, listening to them is starting to annoy him, and wants to wreck everything. But he decides to hold back for his mother's sake, and overlooks everything that's happening. Shortly, Queen Elia comes over to congratulate Errol, and mentions the fact he will be heading to another territory. This lady is obviously trying to get on Errol's nerves, so he stands up and responds in the calmest way possible. He bows and mentions that it would have happened to him either way, so he thinks of it as an early chance to serve the kingdom. With a smirk, she reveals that Jael's swordsmanship has improved thanks to him, and gives him a coat made using the fur of a fox from Fahilia as a gift. With that, Errol has found the person behind his exile. He figures that someone like Jael isn't the type to target anyone politically. Plus, Elia is the only possible one who could obtain the complaints from all the aristocrats. He figures that her giving the coat is her way of mocking him, but he has to remain calm, if not he will lose face. So he puts up a polite act saying that he has already bid his brother farewell, and will come to his aid since they share the same royal blood. On the surface, the conversation appears very cheerful, but Arel couldn't care any less and will definitely make her pay. But they will not show how much they hate each other and exchange the fakest of laughs. The banquet is finally approaching a close, and Arel feels like he forgot something. He takes a look at Kania, who looks unnaturally quiet. He figures that she must still be angry for telling her about his departure pretty late, so he decides to apologize to his sister, but she makes the first move. From her face, he already knows that she is up to something. She runs off, and Errol can tell that what she's going to do is going to be reckless. Kania approaches her father to talk with him and reveals that she will follow Errol to Fahilia. This shocks the crowd, and Arel figures that she has pretty much wrecked the whole event at this point. He takes a glance at her mother, hoping that she is going to stop her daughter, but she doesn't look interested at all. The king gets annoyed by Kania's action and asks what her plan is after that. Errol figures that saying that was already a bad move since she'll only fight back harder. But he wonders the same thing about what she plans to do by following him. For the moment of truth, she reveals that she is going to become Errol's knight, and the soon-to-be ruler instantly punches himself in the face. The king calls her ambition ridiculous since becoming a knight isn't something someone can do so easily, but she is confident in her abilities since she has reached master level. Of course, everyone is surprised since that's obviously a huge achievement. But the king doesn't believe her since she's still 19 years old, and the only person who reached master level at that age was the first king. To prove him wrong, she snatches a sword from a nearby knight and prepares to demonstrate her ability. With her aura charged up, she slices a cake from a distance along with the table perfectly in half. Of course, Errol is shocked about why she's doing this in the middle of the banquet. From that display, the people have seen that she really is a swordmaster and they are amazed. Kania talks with her father about the fact Errol will be given a territory, while she will have to marry someone. So instead of following that, she wants to become a knight. In a normal scenario, Arel would have applauded her speech, but the situation is too serious for that right now. She is pretty much resigning as a princess in front of all the aristocrats. And even if it was all a joke, the damage will still remain. But there's also the possibility that she caused the scene on purpose. Errol realizes that it was all planned out so no one could easily cover the situation up. How she cooked up this plan makes him wonder where she learned to be so conniving. But the answer has always been him from the start. He tries to stop her, but Kania decides to take things up a notch before he can do anything. She then walks towards Arel with the sword in her hand and kneels before him. From there, she pledges her allegiance to Errol and vows to be his knight. Errol recognizes what Kania recited to be a knight's oath, but it's uncertain if the pledge counts since Kania is a princess and not actually a knight. Plus, she doesn't have his consent yet. But the much bigger issue for Arel is the audience that is now facing them. The kite's oath is something that not anyone gets to say freely, so the fact that an aura master said it will make people think the pledge is official. Errol already knows that Kania didn't do it for him, but she has already planned the path she wants to take. Of course, this action shocks several people like the king and her mother. Even Queen Elia is boiling with anger over this. With the veins around her eyes, she could probably awaken the Byakugan. Normally, Arel would be happy about that, but he just feels like crying about this right now. One thing or another always goes on during his birthdays, so he should probably forget about hosting them from now on. Despite a few issues, everything went on as always, like Errol packing up for his journey. With that, the time has finally come to head on his way. His mom mentions how he has grown so fast. Errol tells her not to worry and promises that he will visit her. Eventually, Errol decides to tell his mom where he is going, and she already knows thanks to her mother's senses are way too OP even for a reincarnation pro. However, she is still confident that her son will excel wherever he is. So, she hugs him and tells him that she loves him like a good mother would. Of course, what kind of a son wouldn't love his mother back after saying that? Errol's convoy heads on its way through the frozen wasteland that is Fahilia. However, Errol seems to be a bit unsettled about this. After all, he is going to an ice land where no one has ever gone to settle. He witnesses a bit more of the aristocrat's love when he asks someone to dig the ground. But they must be digging bedrock because the pickaxe bends on the first impact. But still, Errol really wants to prove them wrong and is determined to turn the place into a paradise. Errol finally sticks his head back in the carriage after putting his head out for some unknown reason. Luckily for him, he invested in a magical heating device. Plus, he also has the coat to keep him warm. But Kania mentions that the carriagee is already warm and calls him a noob that can't endure the cold. But what Errol finds strange is his sister. She's such a savage that she's wearing a normal dress in a place that petty cold. However, Errol takes a closer look and finds out that Kania is using a cheat code to stay warm. He never taught her how to use aura to insulate her body, so he wonders if she is doing it out of instinct. He finds her talent scary, and Kania thinks that it's something everyone does, confirming how much of a pro she is. But letting Errol's guards know about this might probably make the two of them cry as they casually freeze outside. With that aside, Errol asks if Kania will eventually regret her decision. But I bet she took the question the wrong way as she stares daggers into Errol's soul. She pinches his cheek and he clarifies that he was wondering if it was okay for her to come so suddenly. It turns out that the king and Errol spent an entire day thinking and decided that she would come along as an apprentice knight. After that, everyone tried to change her mind, but she refused to listen to anyone. She actually doesn't regret coming along. If anything, she finds it to be the perfect opportunity to escape. If she remained at the palace, she would have gotten married soon. Kania is 19 years old now, and Errol is amazed that she made it so far without getting engaged to anyone. So he wonders if that's actually why she decided to venture with him. Just like him, she hates walking along a set path, so it doesn't surprise him about why she came along. Basically, Kania is in search of her own freedom. With that, Errol finally arrives at the gate of his new kingdom. He takes a look at all the people who are currently present under his command, and he figures that he has a great start already. So, it's officially time to start building a paradise. For a start, Errol splits his responsibilities with Asha and Sena so they can command all the troops in Fahilia. However, he doesn't plan to give any tasks to Kania for the time being. It would be a shame if she somehow obliterated the barracks on day one. Instead, she goes for a walk and Errol figures that she probably didn't expect to do much. With that, Errol heads to work. Currently, there are 10,000 people in Fahilia, and they all live in 12 different villages. Additionally, the distance between each village seems to be pretty similar. Errol does his research and discovers that the residents of Fahilia have been hunter-gatherers for generations and are on the verge of extinction. On top of that, the royal palace wasn't getting any taxes from the region, so they were pretty much left on their own. Seeing this makes Errol wonder what kind of idiot the previous lord was. He finds a ledger and discovers that the region was so poor that they ended up borrowing money from other territories. Then the previous lord went bankrupt. Errol gets upset over the sheer stupidity of his predecessor, but he decides to focus on the future he can make for himself. He unfolds a map of the territory and tries to find out what can be special about the region. Seeing the amount of trees in the region, he considers selling paper, but he decides not to worry about it yet since all his other products are making bank for him. With that, he decides to meet with the leaders of the region. Still, he can't help but wonder who holds authority over the people, well, except for the idiot of a lord. So, he decides to ask all the village chiefs to pay him a visit in person. A while later, they make their appearance in the palace and Errol observes their appearance. Forget killing two birds with one stone. They look like they can kill two stones with one bird. They are honored to meet their new ruler as they take a knee before their new ruler. As expected, Errol introduces himself, but he can still tell that they are probably irritated about the fact that they have to take orders from a literal child now. Still, he is determined not to let them take him for granted. He points out the fact there seems to be a young imposter among them. As expected, the dude bows and explains that his father, who was chief, had passed away, so he has now taken on his role. Errol is already aware of this though. He just wants to make it clear that he is the top dog around. He then mentions that they will talk for a while, so he offers them a meal while they discuss matters. They get nervous about this because it's rather strange. Errol already has this all figured out. It turns out commoners would hate having a meal with superiors. So Errol hosts the worst company dinner ever known to man. He tells them to relax. After all, it would be rather exhausting if the mood stayed heavy. Plus, he even practiced this in advance. Finally, they take a look at the meal, and it really looks appetizing. Errol mentions that he wished to get something better, but the subjects are grateful already for the meal. Even with how tense the atmosphere is, at least they are good at replying. One of the guests takes a bite from the meat, and he notices that it is salted. Errol knows that salt is precious in the region, so he wants to establish a friendship through the meal. With that, Errol mentions how the previous lord wasn't the best, and asks if they are all right with the path they are currently headed in. From his perspective, the region will most likely collapse in the next 10 years if nothing is done about it. Hunting can only get them so far, which is why Errol wishes to take over. Even though his orders may be difficult to understand, he asks the people to place their trust in him. With that, they see the pure intentions of their new ruler and now imagine him as their blessed savior. This imagination is so powerful that even Errol can see it, and he doesn't want them to go that far. It would be a shame if there was a resistance to following his orders, so he ensures that the people can enjoy more meals like they have now if they follow him. Now for his first order, Errol asks the chiefs to accept the slaves he brought with him as residents of their villages. Meanwhile, those who are educated will work with him. But the only issue is if the other residents will welcome them. Errol sees the point in this since it will be hard to overlook their backgrounds, or will probably be seen as outsiders. But he tells the elder not to worry since he will also give support concerning the issue. The mention of this support makes the chiefs flinch and they are convinced to try their best. Now the meeting is over, and one of the chiefs wonders about their new ruler since he is unusual compared to the previous lords. Majority of the lords who were appointed to Fahilia showed no interest in the area since they only saw it as a place of exile. The previous lord tried to make a change but ended up inflicting harm on the people instead because he expected the impossible. Now that their new lord is the youngest prince of the royal family, they can only hope that their lives will change for the better. While the reason he was assigned to Fahilia is unknown to them, the only thing they can do is pray he won't be like the previous lord. They can already tell that Errol is no ordinary man, but the only thing they can do is trust that he will make things better. Errol takes a look at a document along with Sena. He was told that the population of the region would be 10,000, but that isn't true thanks to the power of false advertising, and is actually around 9,800 including the slaves he brought. While Sena massages Errol's hand, even she is aware of the population decline. It would make sense to Errol considering the time gap between when the former lord left and when he arrived. On top of that, the birth rate in the territory is pretty low, and struggles with poverty in addition. From the money he made so far, the amount he can use freely is 45,000 gold. If he were to maintain things as it currently is, the place would only last for around 50 years. Errol figures that the aristocrats probably wanted him to waste half of his life in Fahilia, trying to recover the region's economy. He suggests farming, but that's how the previous lord went bankrupt after trying to develop farmlands. Being self-sufficient is a limiting factor for agriculture, so he thinks about trading valuables. And just like that, Errol springs on his feet as he has gotten an idea to implement. Errol heads outside with Asha and figures that they will need roads. The terrain is pretty unstable thanks to the constant snow, plus the roads aren't maintained properly. So that will be a first step to avoid traders from getting into accidents when they visit. Some of the residents find out about this plan. A few laborers are needed for this operation and the wage seems decent. Seeing how the new ruler has a good reputation, they decide to give it a shot to work with him. Besides, he will also cover all the construction costs. When they arrive at the scene, they discover that it is quite the project they have at hand. Someone mentions this fact to Errol, but he is prepared to take care of the extra compensation if it ever takes longer than necessary. With that fact alone, they are more than willing to work. Once again, the power of money works for Errol. Errol notices that everything is going as planned and he loves it. With the road finally complete, it's time to move on to other things, and the workers were very willing to work. For the next step, he wants to establish a trading branch. An official stands in the way of this plan, but there isn't anything that the power of money can't fix. As a start, he figures that they'll trade for the basic necessities that the residents will need. So, a basic trade route has been started up where people get to trade their wares. As the final step, Errol asks Damon if they will be able to mass-produce paper. Actually, paper already exists in the world, but the one that exists is terrible in quality, and no one from within the kingdom knows how to make paper. So, this makes it pretty expensive, and people of high status can only afford to use it. Damon agrees with his plan since it is precious. Besides, they will be very profitable if they can mass-produce it. The only issue is that no one knows how to make it. Well, that is no one except Errol. Damon wonders how the competing paper manufacturers will react to this. But Errol's got this covered. He plans to make the paper production process completely different, so they can argue that it is a completely different product. But to do that, they will need another kind of equipment. He passes a plan to Damon and he finds it to be perfect. However, he isn't sure if it's something they can make on their own. The chemicals can be handled, but developing the machines is a different matter since the best blacksmiths in the region aren't able to make something like that. But Damon is sure that the dwarves of the royal capital will be willing to help. This fact about dwarves reminds Errol of the fact they have a forge in the capital and can make anything no matter how complicated it is. Hearing that, Errol prepares to use his superpower of money spending. But it turns out the dwarves are much different from the rests. Damon tells him that they will refuse to help if he tries to use money. But they are proud craftsmen who will prioritize requests to display their skills. Along with rejecting money, they will also reject requests that aren't good enough, even if they are from high-ranking aristocrats. After hearing who they are, Errol figures that they could become poor if they aren't careful. Damon decides to contact a dwarf that he is familiar with, and Errol is enthusiastic about it. He is sure that he will be intrigued by the plan, so he will write the letter to him. Several days later at the Dwarven Forge, the letter finally arrives. The master there believes it's from the royal family who he doesn't seem to have a good relationship with. The master blacksmith, whose name is Aiken, mentions that he already crafted a sword for them, and their hands are currently full with orders. But he finds out the letter is from Damon. He snatches the letter from his assistant and wonders what he's doing at Fahilia. He takes a look at the content and shortly, he asks his assistant Ben to take charge of the forge. With a fierce look in his eye, he figures he will have to talk with the others. When he leaves, Ben wonders what the letter is since he looked much different from usual. The 35 master blacksmiths of the steel factory gathered according to Aiken's call. But man, they really do not seem happy with it at all. He explains that it is for a client who drew their plans for a machine he wants to make in Fahilia. At first, they thought it was just another case of, another annoying brat wants to waste our time. But when he shows the plan, they realize they might be dealing with the final boss of blacksmith creations. They already know it is a plan for a machine to create paper. Apparently, the design of this machine was so good that it gave them PTSD about a similar client who wanted a machine that created paper 5 years ago. It turns out not even the almighty skills of the dwarves were enough to satisfy that client. Now they have a chance for a rematch 5 years later. Aiken also reveals that Errol wants some of them to come over to assist with his project. However, they don't seem to like that idea a lot, so he volunteers to head over by himself. They still don't seem to agree with this, and also point out the fact he is behind on his work. But the task is something his apprentices can handle, so he is free to go. Also, he asked for who would come along since he would most likely need some more help. After a brief silence, each of the dwarves engage in a free-for-all about who will be going with Aiken. The designs have finally piqued their interest, and you can't stop a dwarf who's motivated to work on something new. Aiken finally interrupts the noise. He mentions that only half of the dwarves will follow him since no one will be around to run the forge if everyone comes along. Still, it is undecided about who will follow, so Aiken decides to use that method. The sacred of all methods, the only method that is guaranteed to work throughout history. Ben comes over to ask his master a question, and the dwarves are engaging in a Fortnite-level battle royale. It turns out it's a dwarven tradition to solve all disputes with intense violence, the dwarven rule of steel. So Ben stays away because he knows what's good for him. Meanwhile, Errol figures it will take at least 5 days to hear back from the Dwarven Forge, so he decides to relax in the meantime. Now he doesn't have any work to do, he decides to get all the rest he can. The moment he decides to take a nap, a loud scream interrupts him. He already knows it's from the Griffin Frey. Then he finds the unfortunate victim plastered on his window. He is surprised by this since Frey shouldn't be able to fly so fast, or so high as a baby griffin. As he falls down, Kanya is there to catch him. It turns out he is being subjected to his form of torture because she wants him to fly higher. Then she tries a little bit too hard and launches him into orbit. Errol rushes outside as he witnesses this and wonders if Frey did anything wrong. She mentions that he did nothing wrong while poor Frey crashes in that one pose from Dragon Ball. She mentions that she is training him to fly and denies that she was abusing Frey. However, I don't think that's the case here. In a quick backstory, Kanya had pretty much nothing to do since everyone was busy in the early stage of transferring to Fahilia, so all she did was eat, sleep, practice sword, repeat. Of course, she isn't the kind of person who enjoys being bored, so she spotted Frey in the garden, and that was when his whole world changed. She plans to make him her mount, so she expects him to be in top shape. However, Errol realizes that it probably was a good idea to teach his sister more common sense, and less about swords. Now he realizes that he has to keep her entertained somehow with the free time he has available. But it's now that he realizes that he was an only child in his first life. On top of that, he never won the sibling lottery in any of his past lives. The best relationship he had with one of them was that he never got to speak with his sibling until he died. So Errol is unsure of how to deal with siblings. He snatches Frey from Kanya and saves him from his suffering. So as an attempt to be a good brother in his current life, he asks to do something together with his sister. Arl and Kanya play a game of chess, and it's pretty obvious who's losing here. Out of frustration, Kanya flips the chessboard since it is obviously not her kind of sport. Errol figured playing chess would mean they wouldn't have to play in the cold, but she is already bored of it, so he gives himself a handicap to make things easier for her. Errol gives Kanya a modified artifact so she can think more quickly and easily. Besides, he's built up enough chess experience from all his past lives, so she will need all the help she can get. So, they begin another game of chess. The pendant seems to be working to enhance Kanya's IQ until it decided to peace out. From there, Kanya had enough of it and slices the chessboard with her sword. Now they can't play chess anymore since Kanya has destroyed the board and caused a leak in Errol's brain. Arl tries to come up with something else, but he really doesn't want to go back outside. He wonders what she has been doing, and the only thing she has pretty much been doing is going on various trainings that will make Bruce Lee proud. On the other hand, Errol has just been a sack of potatoes in his room. Seeing the interest between the two of them, Errol tries to come up with something they can both enjoy. Both of their stomachs begin to rumble and Errol gets an idea from that. He suggests that they have a go at cooking together, but Kania shivers at the mere thought of it. She doesn't buy the idea of it since her cooking could probably put nations to an end. But Errol informs her that it is necessary to learn since she is becoming a knight. After all, knights have to eat something when they are away on missions. After pointing out this fact, Kania is defeated and agrees to learn. Now that Errol has convinced her, he wonders if teaching a sibling to cook is something a brother would do. The two of them head to the kitchen, and Errol announces that their first dish will be a stew. Since it is a pretty simple dish, how bad can things get? Besides, Errol doesn't plan to get food poisoning on day 1 of training, so they get to work. Errol comments on Kania's knife mastery as she slices all the ingredients into Lego bricks. From there, they prepare the stew. When it's finally done, Kania tries it and it tastes better than she thought. Errol agrees with her and adds that it's been a while since he made the recipe, but it's still good either way. Errol suggests that Kania should try making it again, but this is actually all part of his master plan to get a nap right after he finishes eating. But that plan disappears when a butler who has seen things rushes in searching for Errol. He was instructed not to bother Errol concerning small matters, so the fact he's here means something must have happened. So out of urgency, he asks what happened. It turns out the dwarves have arrived and they are willing to beat the living daylights out of the butler if Errol didn't show up. So Errol figures that his break is over. Normally, he expected the dwarves would act normally and send a reply letter, but they weren't normal people, and they showed up pretty suddenly in person. Errol welcomes them, but Aiken cuts to the chase, walks up to Errol, and asks if he was the one who drew the plans. Fortunately, Asha is there to break up any conflict that could have gone down. She demands Aiken to apologize for that, but he commends her spirit even though she is a lady. Now the Dark Souls music begins to play, but Errol quietly reminds her that they generally just don't give a flip, and says that they have to respect their differences. Plus, the greater the skill, the ruder they tend to be. So Asha backs down. Seeing how things started, Errol wants to finish discussions quickly before Asha tries to commit murder. He admits that he drew the plans, but Aiken says he's capping. Errol still tries to convince him that he's the master craftsman, but Aiken refuses to believe him, and bets that a royal person like him couldn't even design a basic wood plank. Now Errol is pissed and he orders Asha to make some dwarf skewer. In the end, the butlers had to calm the both of them down before things could get any further. Now that things have finally calmed down, the dwarves finally accept who crafted the plans. So far, that's what the meeting has been all about. With that out of the way, Errol wonders why such sweaty dwarves come to visit him in person and intended to prepare a nicer welcome. But they don't care about that. They discuss the plan for the machine that Errol needs the dwarves to create, because Fahilia doesn't have blacksmiths skilled enough for the task. Again, Aiken is someone who is so proud, so he expects that humans are not skilled enough to create it. And Errol has just witnessed the famous dwarven pride, so he decides to fight fire with fire and talk about how proud he is of his planning skill. Now the dwarves have received a taste of their own medicine. Aiken acknowledges Errol's skill just as planned, and they decide to talk about the main matter at hand. Before Errol can ask if they will accept the task, they have already decided way before that they will take the job. Errol is shocked by how instantly he accepted it since they haven't discussed other things like payment. But a good dwarf always has a good sense of jobs to take. Besides, they already know that the drawings given to them are only a part of the whole design, so they have to accept the job to see the rest. Errol clarifies that he never intended to mess with them by showing only part of the plan. They understand, but still wish to see the rest of the plan. So, Errol brings it out from his drawer and presents it to them. But it would be too boring if he handed over the plan like that, so he teases Aiken with it. Of course, he doesn't appreciate the game Errol is playing. Errol uses the chance to tell him that he will give him the other plan when he successfully makes the parts of the first plan. Aiken is annoyed by this, but still, he won't refuse the challenge. He heads out of the room with the other dwarves, determined to gain Errol's trust. Once they leave, Errol notes how they take themselves too seriously, but still, he can tell that they like the plans. It turns out he wanted to show them the rest of the plans, but had a better idea to use the unrevealed plan as bait to keep the dwarves working. So they will have to work hard if they want to see the full design. Fast forward a bit, and the dwarves return from their endless work to present the finished piece. Just as agreed, Errol hands them the next plan. This goes on for a few days. I'm sure they have an Errol tracker somewhere because they track him no matter where he is to ask for more plans. Eventually, they finished all of Errol's requests. Even he is shocked by the fiery determination of master crafters who are extremely motivated. What's even more impressive is that the entire machine took 10 days to create. As expected, they take the machine for a test run, and the paper it creates is godlike. Normally, paper would take days to dry by hand, but the machine makes it much easier. Since wood is abundant in Fahilia, Errol already knows that he is on his way to becoming the new Amazon of paper. Or rather, clearing the Amazon because of paper. Now that Errol has what he wants, Aiken finally learns that his problems have only started when Errol asks him to make so many machines that it fills an entire factory. Now to move on to selling the paper, Errol meets with a person who introduces himself as Lichten Einrest, his mother's brother aka his uncle. It turns out he was looking for someone from his mother's family to sell paper, which explains how Lichten showed up. He told his mom to send someone who he could trust since he would be selling an important product. so it would only make sense if she sent someone who shared his blood. He presents the paper he wants to sell to Lichten. Honestly, he thought that the fact Arel was selling paper would ruin his business reputation, but seeing how high the quality and how cheap, it's a dream come true. Apparently, the merchant who trades paper with the kingdom has been raising the price of paper even when the amount of paper exported has gone down, forcing the royal family to buy it anyway. So Errol's intervention is pretty much a deal-breaker for the monopoly-holding merchants. Lichten expresses his concern about how the merchant will react, but Errol already has that covered. He figures that their paper is a completely different product made through completely different means, so they won't have any grounds to attack them. Like a wild Jeff Bezos in its natural habitat, Lichten opens up a map to create a sales plan. Meanwhile, Errol notes his uncle's merchant senses that makes the Spidey sense look like child's play. He believes he has picked the right man for the job, and all that's left to do is wait for the money to come pouring in. Plans have been made about how the paper will be distributed. Plus, the dwarves have filled the factory with machines. Everything is now looking good, only that Errol discovers that the dwarves are leaving just a day after completing the project. He was hoping to celebrate the completion with them. However, they have a backlog of project requests waiting for them, so they have to leave. Aiken mentions that Errol can feel free to contact them for any other requests he may have. While Errol never expected them to leave just after completing their work, everything is now ready to start selling paper. Back in the royal capital, the citizens have a look at Errol's brand new produced paper, and they really cannot believe it. With how cheap and high quality it is, no one can seem to stop talking about it. From there, they recognize the paper as a product of Fahilia, and even go on to speak about the good deeds the new lord of the area has been performing. They even wish to support his efforts to revive Fahilia. The king also notices the different quality of the paper. He is sure that the aristocrats would not spend so much money just to get paper. His butler explains about the new, cheaper brand of paper that has entered the market, so the king can't help but ask where it's from. The moment he learns it's from Fahilia, he notes that it is definitely his son's doing, and figures that he is still the same as always. In addition, Fahilia is also going to start paying taxes once again, and this fact shocks the king. He figures that Errol has also revived the region's economy in such a short time. Even though the land is harsh, he is certainly determined to rule the land. Meanwhile, all this praise gets to Arl, who can feel the fact that someone is praising him. Apparently, they are giving him way too much credit, but it doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is that the money is coming in. Back at the kingdom, Jael has some tea with his mother and notices that the tea tastes different from the usual. She, on the other hand, is apparently upset, but mentions that the tea and desserts are from Errol as a thanks for the coat. From there, Jael mentions the fact that Fahilia has undergone a makeover, and this fact annoys his mother with her hands shaking. Jael notices that his mother seems off, so like a good son, he asks if there's anything wrong. She mentions a certain ornament that she doesn't like. We all know who that ornament is, and it's really getting on her nerves. Jael, on the other hand, doesn't have the knowledge like we do, so he tells her to get rid of it so she can't see it anymore. She mentions that she did, but the ornament keeps annoying her. She almost lets her anger break loose before she tells Jael not to worry. On another topic, he asks if he likes the sword she gave to her. He does like the custom-made dwarven sword and can feel his skills improving. When you spend so much money that can build several manors on a sword, I'm pretty sure all she wants to her is the fact his skills are improving. From there, she stands up and goes towards her son. She reminds him that he is the heir to the throne, and it makes sense to wield a sword worthy of that status. So she tells him to remember that he will become the future king. Later on, she is alone in the room. She picks up a napkin underneath a few cookies and figures that Errol is probably showing the paper he developed. She is incredibly tired of hearing about him, and she tosses the deserts on the floor. It turns out Elia belongs to House Frash, the house that owns the only trading company that imports paper. Apparently, paper was originally made in the Mirman Empire and the Eastern Continent. Since they were at war with the Mirman Empire, they were pretty much banned from importing paper from there. So they turned the trade route with the East and monopolized it. Now Elia is angry that people are now attached to the new paper and is determined to make Errol pay. She dashes over to her room and begins to write a letter with content that I bet is comparable to a Call of Duty multiplayer lobby, as she will not tolerate it anymore. It's night and Aurel once again goes to the slave market. Ian welcomes him since it's been a year and a half since the last business transaction. As expected, Errol is there because he needs more slaves once again. The man asks if he needs the smart ones again, but this time Aurel needs ones who can endure cold weather, like proper slaves this time. The man wonders what Errol needs them for, and he reveals that he will be using them as soldiers this time around. With the infrastructure in place, what is needed now are guards who can defend the territory. Errol also figures that his current status as a ruler is similar to that of an earl. He figures he can increase the size of his army to 50,000 troops, but that would be a bit too much. The slave master asks for the number of people that will be needed, and Errol answers that he will need 5,000 slaves for his new project. With that amount, you can bet that the slave market will certainly be booming. Once again, the power of money is there to save Errol. Moving on, Errol admires the design of a dwarven sword. He managed to train the slaves provided by Ian and also got the dwarves to make soldier gear for 5,000 people. Just like the last time, they managed to do it in a short period. Originally, the slaves looked pretty bad when they arrived at Fahilia, but a few acts of hospitality later, they became more enthusiastic in training and have become extremely loyal to their new leader. With the soldiers in place, the territory will now be safe, and now it's time for Errol to have some rest. However, a few ninja-looking dudes break into the area. It seems they are searching for the location of the paper production machines and their mission is to destroy them. Apparently, Errol's antics have angered the mercenaries' commissioner, but what's more important is the amount of cash they'll make from this job. They note the two guards taking watch and they kill them in a classic ninja fashion. With the guards out of the way, they head into the building only to find it empty. A guard uses a magic tool to blind them before several guards show up and capture all the dudes. One of the assassins tries to escape, but gets ambushed. He only expected there to be 200 troops in the territory, but he was clearly wrong. Errol shows up all sleepy with his guards and isn't surprised that people would be after his machines. The stranger quickly surrenders and mentions that he is only following orders, but that is none of Errol's concern. So as punishment for trespassing and trying to cause damage, Errol orders that they should be interrogated and pretty much torture them. With that, Asha and Sena head to work while the Lord heads back to sleep. Normally, Errol would have forgiven them, but when it comes to things that are dear to him, you better write your will. Even with how laid back he is, he knows when to draw the line. This is something he has learned after countless reincarnations. It's another day in the land of Fahilia, and the intruders from the previous night have been punished according to the law. It turns out nothing was gained from interrogating them, so things were left at that. Now Errol has some free time on his hands and he decides to test out a magic teleportation circle. He got Feon to make one for him, and it was so expensive that he thought about that fact twice. His merchant skills have surprised Errol. Now he's become a regular customer for his uncle. So, Errol decides to use his teleportation circle to head home since it has been a while since he last visited. He puts in a few magic stones into the stands surrounding the circle which causes it to activate. Now that his end is set up, all that's needed to do next is for his nanny to set up the same circle at the palace. He asks Kania to come with him, but she is very nervous about this. She has no choice but to follow since Errol insists. Plus, she also has a bit of free time on her hands. Errol notices her expression and wonders what is wrong. She unintentionally reveals that she had an argument with her mom and would be awkward to visit her after that. With that fact, Errol believes she should definitely come along so she can reconcile with her mother, and she nervously agrees with this. She seems scared, so Errol tells her that using the device is safe. The only issue is nausea. He activates the device and Kania gets scared. She holds onto her brother and unintentionally squeezing the life out of her little brother, making him think he will probably not make it alive. With Errol potentially dead, they finally arrive at the palace. But Errol still has something to say about his sister's strength. As he takes a look around, memories of the past come back to him, and he has really missed the place. He takes a deep breath before falling onto the field to relax. He is definitely glad to be back from a land of ice. The nanny comes over to welcome Errol and Kania. She was a bit worried she wouldn't be able to use the magic circle properly, but thankfully, it worked out. She informs the two of them that their mothers are waiting inside, so they split up to say hello to them. Errol wonders if his mother, Rafana, is doing well. After all, he promised to visit her often. He runs over to meet with his mom and hugs her. She heard about how well he has been doing from Lichten, but she is still relieved to see him in person. Errol is surprised he has been writing letters to her since the paper business always drained his soul. Of course, he is excited to tell Rafana how everything has been going in Fahilia, and wishes to make good use of his time so his mom will not be worried about him. He goes on to tell his mom about several things about Fahilia like the wildlife and the daily life of the people, focusing on putting her mind at ease. It is not long until someone else approaches the scene, and Errol notices this. Looking at the timing, he can already tell that whoever the person is, they intentionally want to interrupt his conversation with Rafana. It doesn't take a genius to find out it's Queen Elia. Errol wonders why she is acting all surprised since he already announced the fact he will be visiting. Still, he can't help but notice that she probably has something up her sleeve, so he decides to feel her out. So he engages her in some fake small talk, and also mentions the paper he developed which is affecting her family business. The world's most painful to watch conversation. On the topic of paper production, she mentions a few rumors she heard and Errol wonders what she is talking about. He informs her that he has already made preparations, and Elia commends his efforts. Still, she warns him to be careful before she takes her leave. On the outside, Errol waves her goodbye, but he believes she is starting to cross a line from the warning she just gave. Rafana figures that she is probably having a bad day, but Errol figures that he has deal with her soon. The short visit to the palace is finally over, so Errol and Kania decide to head back to Fahilia. Errol waves his mother goodbye and then asks Kania how things went on her end. She responds that it went well and smacks Errol on the back for worrying that she would fight with her mother again. But actually, Errol already asked the maids to report what was happening. It looked like they were about to fight again, but they actually made up this time around. Either way, the two of them teleport back to their territory. A few days later at Fahilia, Errol is already challenged with a new problem. He wonders if it will be worth it to invest in magicians, since they can do a lot of things like manage the teleportation circle, help with growing crops instantly, and even defend against monsters. But most importantly, he needs someone who can help him deal with the totally challenging experiences of being a ruler. He thinks about this because he doesn't want to end up drawing so much attention to himself. Now he has a territory, he has a perfectly good reason to hire them. But another reason is the factory attack. Luckily, the first attack was by a few mercenaries, but he is worried about what would happen if magicians pulled up. Sure, he does have a few knights who can probably deal with them, but they'll be as useful as a glass hammer if an enemy magician attacked from the shadows. With all those in mind, he creates an official notice that he is looking for magicians to hire. He figures that he can put a request at the magic tower, but dealing with them is going to be a pain. Plus, they are expensive. But the magicians who will respond to notices will have no ties with the tower, and there will be less hassle to deal with them, which is a dream for Arel. The only issue is that he'll also receive applications from low-ranking magicians, but that is no issue since Errol can always train them. With that, the next thing is to distribute the notices in every city. Time goes on, and the notice draws the attention of the crowds and wizards, including this one wizard who looks like she was out surviving in the wild with Bear Grylls, and is willing to apply from the mention of free food and accommodation. Back at Fahilia, Errol has received mountains of applications from various magicians. He wishes to accept all of them, but that would probably be a good step in How to End Your Kingdom 101. Errol decides to be thorough about this process and pay attention to the applicants' backgrounds. After all, it would be a shame if a magician became his enemy. He is so willing to do this that he doesn't mind spending an extra bit of cash for this. After selecting the candidates, the next stage was the interviews. For some reason, this was more of a hassle than picking his personal knights, but it was still worth the trouble for him. In the end, 12 magicians pass the interview and are officially magicians of the kingdom. The average skill of the magicians is 3rd class, and Arel believes he made a good selection considering their backgrounds. With that, Errol announces the general tasks of the magicians and plans to assign them to areas that suit their strengths. But before that, he wants to select one person to become his personal magician, so he asks the 4th-class magicians to raise their hands. There are 2 people who fit this criteria. One is Munkoi Blob, and the other is Dia Reki. Seeing the choices he has, Errol takes a long, hard thought about choosing between Blobfish or Wizard Beauty. This is a decision that can change the fate of the world, and we all know that Errol is going to choose Dia. Putting the pretty looks aside, there is a main reason why Arel chose Dia to be his personal magician. During the interview, he asked Dia a question about why she applied, and she responded with the fact that she wanted to serve him. This response shocked him due to how unusual it was. Most of the candidates were usually interested in the benefits or the work responsibilities, but hers was way different. It turns out she pretty much applied just because of Arel. He is pretty much suspicious about this, but can't sense any bad intentions from her. So, he decides to test it out and hire her as his personal assistant. Next, he goes on to explain the benefits and responsibilities of being a wizard in the territory. Starting with the benefits, he presents a massive library which is pretty much a paradise for every wizard nerd there. Starting off with the books that are magic ones certified by the Magic Tower, which were both expensive and difficult to convince them to certify the books. Now they have a place to improve their skills. On top of that, the magicians he hired were all expelled from the Magic Tower and probably needed a lot of money to access the magic book library. Of course, the broke magicians will be happy that they can access all the books that they have always wanted. They are in disbelief that they can use the library for as much as they want. But in exchange, Errol lets them know that they will have to show their research notes to prove that they are actually making any progress. Well, they don't seem to have any problem with that arrangement. However, Errol actually needs the library too, so he can master his own magic and understand the world's magic system using their research. Plus, the new magicians will pretty much be researching for him as well. Next, he begins to assign the wizards to different areas. He assigns some to handle the deforested areas in the land. After all, there need to be trees if he ever dreams of making more paper. So, Errol has to take responsibility for the damage he has done to the environment. He shows a planted sapling to the magicians, and it is enough for them to head to work. They all stab their staffs into the ground and chant some words I'm not going to bother with understanding. Then the sapling begins to erupt from the ground. Errol analyzes their technique and figures that they are funneling their mana into the tree and using a spell to nourish it with the right amount of mana. He also wonders if they are also using magic to alter its genetic makeup. Looking at how much the tree has grown, Errol commends the technique, but can't help but ask if they're going to make it grow taller. A wizard explains that if they do that in a short amount of time, the tree will die. After all, trees also have to rest as well. They will help it to grow once a month, which gives around half a year to restore the entire forest. With the environmental issues facing one of Arel's previous lives, he bets that this would be mind-blowing, but too bad. Anyway, Errol leaves them to do their job. For the next group, he gives them the task of maintaining the village's fields. He plans to make Fahilia to become a place that is self-sufficient through farming, rather than only relying on hunting. A wizard asks if he should grow crops at the current location. While that is the main goal, he asks if they are willing to go around the 12 villages to cultivate them, and this question sends chills down their spine considering how much work that would be. Of course, Errol is not an evil ruler. All he wants them to do is to adjust the field to the right conditions, and the villagers will take care of the rest. He scribbles a plan and asks the magicians if they can handle it. From the looks of it, they are sure they can handle the task. To help with their job, Errol mentions the fact that he brought over some magic tools and wants to test them out. They place the magic artifacts around, and then they create a barrier that will allow only sunlight to pass through. With that, the group has officially created the manna house, not to be confused with a greenhouse. So, they went ahead to install the rest of those devices in the other villages to save the villagers from starvation. After that was done, Errol assigned 2 magicians as part of the magic tool research team, and another 3 as security. Lastly, there's Dia, who is Errol's personal magician. Her job is to guard him and to also carry out errands. She's pretty much his magic errand girl since he's not in a position to use magic. But for now, he wants her to skill up by reading magic books. She is way more than passionate about this, as she wishes to support Errol in any way that she can. Errol can tell that she is just as sincere as she was during the interview, and wonders what's up with that. Shortly, a book drops from Dia's cloak. Errol picks it up and he recognizes it as one of his night books that the knights couldn't understand. He hands it over to Dia and wonders why she has such a book when she's a magician. She received it from a person she knows but got attached to it because she found aura and mana are similar in theory, an idea Errol also shared in his research. This book has pretty much been a lifesaver for her, and she mutters that she is willing to go even across continents to serve the adored author of the book. Errol, on the other hand, feels she is going way too far with her dedication. All he did was write some basic theories in it, and doesn't recall it being so inspirational. Besides, Dia enjoys the food around the palace, which gives the actual reason she came along. Even with that, Errol figures that it's probably a good thing that she is so dedicated to him, but he still hopes that making her his personal magician was the right choice. In the library, Errol learns about how magic works. Now that he's understood the theory, he tries to remember how Dia uses magic so he can try it out. With that, he is now able to channel mana as a flash of light emerges from the library. Now Errol is on the way to becoming a magic pro. With the magic training in progress, Errol proceeds to pay attention to his other responsibilities. He arrives at the capital of Ernesia, and their destination is the Dwarven Forge. While they stand in front of the factory, Asha considers wreaking havoc at the main base of the annoying dwarves. She plans to annihilate the entire building if they try anything funny, but Arel tells her not to do that since they're mainly there for business. She tried to object, but she was officially banned from doing anything. Shortly, the intense heat of the factory breaks the conversation. Just as they head inside, Errol already wishes to escape with how hot the environment is. Ben introduces himself to the 2 of them, including the fact he has been an apprentice of the bitter Aiken for 15 long years, and volunteers to be their guide. Of course, Errol and Asha pity poor Ben who has been working under Aiken for so long. On the other hand, Ben mentions that he was meant to come out to welcome them, but his master didn't tell him anything. He finally leads them to the room where Aiken is while the other 2 sympathize with the struggle he's going through. Then there's Aiken, who is pretty impatient with his visitor's arrival. Errol mentions how impatient he is. He wasn't planning to arrive right after sending the letter to him. So Aiken serves his guest a cup of wine and wants to get right into the meat of why Errol came to visit. It turns out Errol has a much different request this time around. This time, he asks for half of the dwarves to work as his personal craftsmen in Fahilia. Without a second thought, he rejects the proposal and points out that Arel sounds drunk already. Aurel finishes his request by mentioning that he wants half of the dwarves to establish a branch at Fahilia. He adds that he will even pay for all the expenses. Even with that, Aiken still refuses the offer, or to even work in a place like Fahilia. Besides, money is pretty much the least of his concerns. So instead of that, Errol offers to hand them his personally developed technique called Damascus Steel. Aiken's face lights up on hearing this, and he figures that Damon must have given him information about this fact. It turns out the dwarves came to Ernesia in search of Damascus Steel, a rare metal that doesn't exist in their homeland, and had the dream of being able to forge that metal. Now, Errol reveals that he knows how to craft it, and even promises other exclusive techniques if they agree to work under him. This is enough to make Aiken serious, and even Errol can tell by the dramatic shift in his tone. With the proposal out there, Aiken inquires what Errol's conditions for the deal are. He mentions that they will have to work under him for 10 years. Of course, Aiken refuses to agree with this before they finally agree at 5 years. With negotiations made, Aiken is going to inform the other dwarves and asks for a month to get ready. This makes Errol wonder how much Damascus Steel means to them since it was the thing that led him to convince the dwarves. With that out of the way, Errol heads back with Asha. After the negotiations, Errol wishes to do what he does best, slack off, since he now has a reason not to do anything. One time skip later, and we have Kania. She takes a look out the window and wonders if Errol has been seen outside his room. His guards haven't seen his whereabouts either, but Sena mentions that he claimed to have travel fatigue and needs to rest. Even with that, it is still unbelievable to Kania that he hasn't left his room in over a week. She rushes over to his room to check on him. When she busts open the door, she finds my guy living his best life. He welcomes Kania and figures that she arrived to have dinner with him. While she is stunned by what she is seeing, Arl prompts Dia to arrange the scene for the both of them. Using her magic, she lifts Errol into the air, puts on his clothes, and then sets up a dining table for both Errol and Kania. While Errol is being fed by magic, Kania is still shocked. Errol wonders why she isn't eating, but she is very certain that something is wrong with everything she is witnessing. However, Errol thinks it's alright. She figures that Errol's laziness is probably top-notch at this point. Then Errol tells his personal magician to take him to the bath, and this is enough to make Kania snap as she obliterates the area. So Kania and Errol's guards start an emergency intervention for Errol. As a start, they would like to ask him a question. Errol wonders if it's serious since he is unaware of his crime, so he asks Dia, who doesn't seem to know what the problem is either. Errol begins to think it's nothing that's much of a big deal, before Kania clarifies that he is getting too reliant on magic. Errol is a bit confused by what she means and thinks there's something wrong with Dia. However, how hardworking and diligent she is wasn't the problem here. The main problem is Errol, who probably doesn't walk with his own legs anymore. He mentions that he still walks to the bathroom, but that obviously isn't enough. Even his guards tell him the same thing, that using magic too much is bad. He is only looking for a more convenient life and asks if Dia is fine with all the work. She is, and Errol still doesn't see the problem. But the rest still see the problem as broad as daylight. Kania informs Dia that she is only making the problem worse for Errol. While it may seem alright in the palace, it definitely won't be okay in public. Errol already knows that he won't get to that level, or rather, it becomes a good idea for him. Of course, everyone is already against this before he mentions that he is joking. As his older sister Kania bans Errol from using magic, and this surprises him. Then Kania also bans Dia from putting up with Errol's requests, and this seems like her only form of life support has been cut off. Dia believes that she is about to be fired, but Kania informs her that is not the case. Meanwhile, Errol begins to reflect on his actions. He never thought that things would get to how they are now, and he has finally realized how magic can turn a lazy slob into a more lazier slob. Kania informs him that he will ruin his health if he continues, but Dia reveals that she has been stimulating his muscles every time she moves him, so he won't get weak so easily. Still, it is a problem, and Kania suggests replacing Dia with another magician. However, Dia pleads that it shouldn't resort to that. While she isn't sure of other things, she is very confident that she is much better than the other magicians, so she refuses to step down from her role. Looking at the situation, Errol figures that Kania had hurt Dia's pride as a magician. Asha comes by to break things up, and wonders why she wants to remain Errol's personal magician, even though the suggestion to switch roles has been pretty much justified. Even Errol is curious too, since there will be no difference in pay, and would even work way less compared to dragging Errol's lazy bum all over the place. But then it hit Errol that he should be the one who should make that decision. But his opinion doesn't matter at this point, so Kania challenges Dia to convince her, and she accepts this since she doesn't have much of a choice at this point. Seeing as his opinion has been rejected, Errol wants to know the kind of tests Kania has in store. She starts off with a document test that was definitely not just made up in 5 seconds before she mentioned it. And Dia completes is easily using her magic. Arl has already been giving Dia his workload, plus magic pretty much involves calculations. So she was already prepared for the moment. Next is the cooking test, where Dia will have cook all manner of stuff to Errol's taste. But once again, she is able to do this thanks to her previous experience back at the Magic Tower. She prepares all the food, and it is perfect for Errol. It's almost scary to him about how good she is. While Kania tries to bring up some more, totally not made up at the spot tests, Errol speaks with his guards and asks why they are all doing this. He already knows that Kania wouldn't go after Dia for no reason, plus they would have tried to intervene, but they aren't doing anything. So he knows they have another reason for doing all of this. From there, it turns out that Kania is suspicious of Dia. There was an incident a few days ago where the magic security system was partly destroyed by an unknown individual. While they don't believe Dia is the culprit, Asha presents a letter from the intruder to Errol. He reads it and finds that whoever it is wants Dia back at the Magic Tower. It turns out they had also shown this same letter to Dia, but she was speechless, or rather, unbothered by it. Asha and Sena believe that her reaction was rather strange and figures that there is a reason why she is so loyal to Arl. A normal person would have given up with him after around 3 days. Errol has already looked into her heart and found that she doesn't have any bad intentions, but there's no way he can convince Kania and the guards about that. To be honest, Kania has low-key disliked magicians after the Black Magician incident. He can understand that could be why Kania is acting like that towards Dia, but he asks Asha and Sena to hold back their judgment. While he deals with the issue concerning Dia, he asks the two of them to calm Kania down. With that settled, he heads on his way to talk with Dia and find out the truth. Arl goes to Dia's room to apologize for all the issues that came up earlier in the day. He notes how her room looks pretty bare, probably because she hasn't lived in the room for a long time. Dia understands the situation that played out and believes that anyone serving Arel should be thoroughly reviewed. But let's be real here, Errol's standards aren't that high. Arl explains that Kania has always had a thing against magicians, and was against him having a personal one. But Dia is already familiar that this is because of the incident with the Black Magician. It even became a pretty famous story back at the Magic Tower. It turns out that the incident also made aristocrats distrust them, and this cut their earnings. So they were ordered to kill any black magicians if any were found. Arl tells Dia not to worry about Kania's behavior. However, she insists that his intervention is not necessary. She still holds a grudge from the earlier encounter and wants to prove her skills as a magician to Kania. Now, Errol wants to know why she insists so much on being his personal magician. Even though they have never met each other, Errol can't understand why she is so obsessed with him. From there, she explains about her past. Dia was taken in by the magic tower as a poor child after a disease killed everyone in her village, her family included. On hearing this, Errol figures that they must have taken her in since they recognized her potential in mana, since Tai only take in orphans once they recognize talent. Even with that, Dia wasn't good at magic, so she was demoted to chore girl. This confuses Errol as he wonders how the gap in skill got bridged. It turns out Dia was a first-class magician 2 years ago, and has somehow managed to jump up to a fourth-class magician now. She couldn't control her mana through the magic tower's teaching method until she came across Errol's flagship book, the one about knights. From there, you can pretty much guess what happened. The method in the book was just right for her, and she ended up reaching the 4th class within 2 years. While that is hard to believe, Errol realizes that his theory seems to sit right with Dia and believes that she is a genius who can improve only by reading. So who knew, if it weren't for Errol, she could have remained as a chore girl in the tower for the rest of time or something. With that, this is the reason why Dia refers to Errol as her savior. However, he lets her know that it's from all the work she has put in. But she will still call him what she wants to call him. She's apparently stubborn. After that, Dia left the magic tower, and her master, former master, was very angry with this. However, she didn't care since she improved, no thanks to him. But she really hates the fact that he went around telling everyone that she reached the 4th class because of him. After that, she went on a journey to find where her savior lived, and even went to the other side of the continent just to search for him. It was then she found that Fahilia was hiring magicians, which allowed her to find Errol and consider him as her true master. After this story, Errol suggests that she could have told the same story to Kania, but she doesn't want to share that embarrassing story with anyone else, and also wants to be respected for her skills. So Errol promises not to tell anyone and heads out of her room wishing her good luck. In the night, Errol is in his bedroom. He speaks with Phaon, who seems to be aware of Dia. Even he admits that she had undergone an unfortunate fate, and her master wasn't a very good one. He also adds that she developed her skills alone and risked the penalty of leaving the tower. It turns out there is a contract made to protect the secrets of the magic tower, and once it is broken, the offender loses half of their magic circles and goes back to being a low-tier magician. Finally, Errol learns how strict the magic tower can be, so he thanks him and turns off his device. He places it aside and thinks about all the risks Dia took just so she can meet with him, so he decides to step in to see how he can help. The next day, Kania and Dia face off with each other. Errol had to tag along, but he never expected Kania to be so serious about this. She challenges Dia to a duel, and looking at the two fighters, Errol already knows that this is a pretty unfair battle. He tries to stop them, but Dia insists since the only way Kania will accept her is through a battle. Kania, on the other hand, doesn't get why she is so loyal to Errol, so she wants to find out on her own terms. Errol sees that the situation is going out of hand and wonders why his 2 guards aren't stopping them. But what does he want them to do? Even they can't stop it. So Errol wonders what he can do until he notices something in the bushes nearby. The battle is about to start. With all the aura and mana flying around, Dia begins to float. She gets ready to cast a spell, but Errol notices that she isn't using an attack spell. She uses her spell to expose an intruder while Kania tosses her sword sheath at them. Then the thing explodes after gathering some aura in it and turning it into a grenade. After that, Kania and Dia approach the intruder and find out that it's Dia's master from the magic tower. Now they've found the mysterious intruder who has been around Errol's palace. He claims to not be anyone suspicious, so he presents his identification papers. He reveals that he came to bring Dia to the magic tower, and is angry about the situation she has just put him in. However, she doesn't have any plans of returning with him. All he did was just assign her to do some odd chores and starved her when he got the chance. Even with that, he still demands that she has to return since the Grandmaster has been disturbing him non-stop about it. Errol jumps in and figures that he's actually being pressured to raise another apprentice that is as good as Dia, and that is going pretty well so far. Just as Errol points out the man's lack of skill and incompetence, he grabs Dia by her hand and drags her away. He mentions that he is going to file a complaint about Errol's insolence, and adds that Dia will be punished for leaving the tower without permission. Fortunately, Errol breaks his grip and mentions the fact that Dia signed a contract to be his personal magician. Plus, he also got permission from the magic tower. The man tries to tell him about the rules, but Errol lets the loud person know that he made an official request, and the magic tower has permitted Dia to remain as his personal magician. Now that everything has been resolved, it's now time for him to leave. However, he refuses to leave without a fight, especially with how hard it is to get to the current location. He throws a few magic balls to the ground and creates several golems. He is determined to bring Dia back, so he orders his minions to attack. He believes that if he brings Dia back and trains her, the magic tower will probably defend him. So he can't afford to lose. The man has probably picked a wrong fight, so Errol tells everyone to fight back. Kania goes to do what she was born for, along with the other guards. Seeing that he would be bold enough to attack, Errol thought he would be at least a Class 7 mage, but he was only at a disappointing Class 5. The man attempts to use one of his golems to take Errol as a hostage, but that's obviously a bad idea. Dia fries the golem to a crisp with a lightning bolt spell and uses a wind spell on the remaining minions and the wizard. Errol figures that it's time to finish everything. But before that can happen, the wizard uses an emergency escape teleportation scroll to run away. Asha insists on chasing him, but Errol tells her not to worry and mentions that he will file a complaint with the magic tower. Dia apologizes for the situation her personal issue has caused, but it's not a problem, and Errol mentions that she is officially cleared from suspicion. She wonders what he means by that, so Errol explains that he already knew about her master's presence. She wanted to see if she would confront him, which would prove her loyalty to him. She did exactly that, defeated her master, and surely no one will have any other complaints about her. Meanwhile, at a different location, Dia's master is breathing heavily after a narrow escape. He still has his mind bent on bringing her back to the magic tower. His monologue is cut short when a mysterious figure on a tree approaches him. Of course, he wants to know who the person is, but instead, the figure roasts him with a fire spell. It turns out this mystery person is Errol, who wanted to use the guy as magic practice for the spells he learned. He figures that killing him was better than letting him receive some official punishment. Either way, he still can't let him live for Dia's sake. After that, he decides to head back before anyone notices that he is missing. Moving on, Errol is working as usual and Dia assists him by handing him a book. He catches the book and tells her that she doesn't need to assist him with magic anymore, even though he permitted her. After that suspicion incident, Errol stopped relying so much on Dia, probably because Kania warned her about supporting his laziness. She asks if Errol is still fine with her being his personal magician. The incident wasn't her fault, so he is still fine with it. With that said, she commends how merciful Errol is, and decides to reflect on her actions like worrying over something like that. Of course, her level of loyalty still makes Errol very uncomfortable. He also asks what would happen if he let her down. However, she still considers him her savior no matter what. With that response, Errol now has a magician who is incredibly loyal to him and is fascinated by all the people you can meet in life. It's a brand new day. It's peaceful. Birds are chirping, flowers are blooming, and Errol is enjoying every moment of it, until he causes all forms of chaos with his magic in the name of practice. And there goes the peace I was talking about a moment ago. Errol has become a Class 6 magician already, all in 1 month. By the way, all the chaos he caused was at the edge of his territory, and is the perfect place for doing any secret activities since no one comes there. But one thing that would have made things better for Errol's practice is monsters, but it's honestly a good thing they aren't there. With all that out of the way, Errol finally figures it's the perfect time to make his move. Errol recalls the time he first saw Queen Elia as a baby, and even from that time, she already hated him from the way she stared at him. He planned to overlook it, but she kept targeting him using politics, and was even hostile to him in front of his mother. So, using his magic, he levitates over to Queen Elia's domain since he is fed up with her antics. He finds an alarm barrier surrounding the building which allows certain mana wavelengths to pass through, but Errol passes through it because he's just that good. Luckily, the guards aren't aware of his breaking in. He looks at Elia's parents' home and mentions how it is larger than his. But too bad, because he creates a massive fireball and is ready to wreck the entire thing. The fireball explodes and fire begins to rain down on the area. Meanwhile, the residents of the building notice this, all confused and stuff, trying to evacuate the building to safety. But they are unaware that this is all Errol's doing since he is using an invisibility and sound muting spell to hide himself. A bit overpowered if you ask me. But moving on, Errol sees the vassal of the Duke family of Fresh, so he decides to make life a little hard for him by implanting a special curse in him that will give him flu-like symptoms, or probably COVID, and that will preempt him from taking action after the invasion. Errol is planning to take back a few souvenirs with him, since it took some effort to get there. He approaches a door, crushes the lock to the door, and reveals what's inside. Looking in, Errol has literally struck gold since it's the treasury. He plans to take everything with him through teleportation, and leave a little note as a collectible. Much later, some of the residents escape the building, but they find a letter and already know that it's from the culprit. When they take a look at it, they find Errol's handwork, but they do not know who left the message. After the act, the first person to receive the news was Elia. All the life drained from her after she found out what happened, and she drops to the floor. Luckily, there were no casualties after the incident, only a few minor injuries. Even with that, the question remains about who would do such an act. The king also learns about this and orders that the culprit should be found. Looking at the attack, it is believed to be caused by a Class 6 magician, or a group of magicians, or could even be black magicians like the incident with Kania. Someone interrupts the meeting to inform that the nobles of the Frach family are all ill after the fire incident. Later, Elia finds out that the source of her family's pride, the enormous wealth they had, has all been stolen. She orders her maid to find out who committed such a crime at all costs, but also remains careful since she can also be the next target as well. Back at Fahilia, Asha learns about the situation. She reports that the Frach family's status has fallen, plus no one can help them because they are all afraid that they'll be targets of the next terrorist attack. She discusses everything that happened with Kania, but still, they won't come to ruin since they are a greater noble family. But they still received a heavy blow. Then there's the main culprit who agrees that they should be careful since a terrorist attack will not be nice. He then volunteers to send a donation to the Frash family, probably out of the stolen treasure, as a sign of support to them. At Fahilia, the manor house is working perfectly and crops are beginning to grow. Even with a place like Fahilia, no one expected to gather anything. Plus the harvest is twice as big compared to before. This is all thanks to the magicians who have been pulling all-nighters to make sure the tools are just right. Now, Errol takes a look at the manor house and how peaceful everything is at the moment. With House Frash out of the picture and the territory stable, he wishes it would remain this peaceful. Now in the past, around 50 years ago, 3 countries came to power after a great war, and they became known as the 3 Great Nations. But among the 3 was the Kingdom of Domanial, which was weaker than the Kingdom of Ernesia and the Mirman Empire, but it managed to gain its position by taking advantage of the war. Speaking of the Kingdom of Domanial, they are going through a bit of trouble. The king, Hizan Lugia Lutanea, discovers the documents containing evidence about the products being smuggled from the Kingdom of Ernesia, and he is definitely not chill about it. He is worried about the future of the kingdom, but his right-hand man, Elgazan, tries to calm him down. With the way things are going, the economic crisis of the kingdom will be too great to overcome in the next 5 years, and obviously, that is not a good thing. Previously, the difference in wealth between the 3 great nations wasn't so bad, but that all changed when a certain child came in and casually caused an economic imbalance. Concerning his paper, the Mirman Empire even tried filing a complaint concerning the paper production, but that didn't work because he was producing it in a different method, leaving them with no other way to bridge the gap. Elgazan suggests using force, but they are up against the Ernesia, which is pretty much like the Fire Nation of the world. However, he mentions that they will have to join forces rather than challenge them on their own. So, with that, the Kingdom of Domanial sent messengers to 3 different nations to request an alliance. They meet up in some secret shady meeting room in Domanial, and Elgazan welcomes the participants. The representatives who showed up are from the Mirman Empire and the Chejapen Duchy, and they both have scars for some reason. But anyway, it turns out the other place with the name I won't bother with saying again is a small territory, but with a high military reputation. Then there's the Holy Empire who didn't even bother to show up, but they probably want to watch Ernesia burn just as much as them, so they will not snitch on the meeting. Of course, the meeting begins, and they discuss the fact that they have to stop Ernesia because of the shift in economic power. Since Ernesia is a pretty strong kingdom, they will need the alliance so they can put up a proper fight. Elgazan figures that they will not be able to develop any products if they are pressured with war, but he shifts his attention to the youngest prince, which is Arel, and how he has been developing various products plus all his renowned achievements. So they figure that if they leave him, he will probably continue to do several things which will lead Ernesia to be unstoppable. So the main objectives are to either deal some significant damage to the kingdom or kill Errol. The 2 representatives agree with the plan and have even wanted to go to war from the very start, and now things have gotten moving between them. Back at Ernesia, the king learns about the meeting between the 3 nations and is sure that something is going on. So he decides to make preparations, since the oncoming war will be much worse than the previous one, and orders that each territory should be notified about it. Errol gets this notice back at Fahilia and begins to wonder if he went too far even when he restrained himself. Daya asks if anything has happened since he usually enjoys his strolls. He mentions that he has to meet with Kania since something troublesome has happened, and they will have to be fully prepared. So in summary, Ernesia makes money, Domanial doesn't like it. So Domanial starts alliance. They don't like each other but want to defeat Ernesia. End of meeting. With how everything played out, they are probably treating Arel like some kind of a villain. Kania learns of the upcoming war and the alliance between the Mirman Empire and the other 2 kingdoms. It was understandable if it was between the Mirman Empire since they aren't on good terms, but doesn't understand the case with the other 2 kingdoms since she thought Ernesia was chill with them. So she suggests a classic Kania move to attack them first. For once, Errol agrees with this idea, but it would be difficult to find any evidence since the meeting happened in secret. After all, there's no way they would leave any evidence after the super obvious secret meeting, and they are pretty much lucky to find out about it. Errol already knew that it would come to the war, but he never expected it to come around so soon. From all the past lives he's been in, he thinks about how humans always have to resort to war, and finds the reason for the current war to be ridiculous. Of course, he believes that war isn't the answer to every problem. Kania brings him out of his thoughts since nothing has been confirmed yet. He then suggests that Kania should return to the royal palace. It turns out the king sent him a letter to express his concern and stop her from going into battle, but Errol could head to the front line for all he cared. Errol mentions that this is a viable option since her status as a princess could benefit her more than her status as a knight, but Kania refuses to head back without a thought. Errol tries to warn her that she could end up on the battlefield if things end up wrong, but she is more than okay with that. Besides, she pledged to keep her younger brother safe and doesn't want to flee to safety just because she is a princess. She believes that being royalty is more of a reason not to run away. Seeing her resolve, Even Errol has noted how his beloved sister has grown up and decides to let the king know about her decision since it's pretty much impossible to stop Kania. In the recreation room of Arl's castle, Sena discusses the upcoming war with Asha and Dia. It turns out Sena has been to war twice, but is sure that the current one will be much more serious than those ones. She suggests that Asha should visit her hometown to see her brother since he started studying at the academy. While that sounds like a good idea, Asha decides to stay back since anything can happen at any time. She also adds the fact that Sena has been pushing back her holidays to stay as well. Seeing that they can't go anywhere, they just decide to have all the fun they can have while they still can. At Errol's quarters, he makes plans for the war. He believes that it could happen within a year. Even with his experience from several reincarnations, he isn't sure about how the war will turn out. He also plans to intervene if it comes to the worst-case scenario, but that would mean him abandoning his peaceful life, which is his main priority. To survive the war, he decides to do a military buildup to prevent the opponents from breaking in. Errol rushes over to meet Aiken, who would have almost scored an early headshot with his hammer on Errol. He mentions that the facilities in the location are pretty good, but the other blacksmiths are pretty hopeless to him. They worked for 2 days without sleep, and they all collapsed. Aiken is upset about this, but of course, normal people would die after working like that. But anyway, Aiken has received the documents to make Damascus steel, and is shocked that it could be made with such materials. However, the process will not be easy since he has to be precise about it. To the main point, Arel asks for some weapons to be made, and Aiken agrees to it. When he asks how many he would need, Errol goes over to whisper, which makes even Aiken to be shocked. Then he makes a getaway since Aiken is out to hunt him now. It turns out Errol wanted him to make 20,000 pieces of armor, and he is definitely not chill with that. On the other hand, Errol figures that he better watch his back if he keeps doing this. Next, he goes to meet Ian, the slave dealer, who is now dripped out from all the cash he's been receiving. He welcomes the top customer as always, and they head straight to business since it's an urgent meeting. This time, Ian will be receiving the order of a lifetime, and he's even contacted every possible merchant before the meeting. Errol raises his hand and requests for 50,000 slaves, which is 10 times the last order, and you can expect that even Ian never expected this amount. Ian couldn't believe it. He finds himself repeating the enormous number just to see if our prince is kidding or not, but our boy responds by asking him if they were too much. That's when the slave trader sees that the prince is truly standing on business here. He tells him that the truth is that there's been an increase in nobles looking for slaves, and they've been asking for about 2,000 to 3,000 people, saying they all intend to use them as troops. But 50,000 people? What in the world is he doing with 50,000 people? He asks him if he intends to use all of them for the same purpose. The prince tells him not at all, as like before, that number includes the slaves and their family members. But he tells the slave boy that his speculation isn't too far off the mark. The slave trader dude starts smiling hard at this cash cow opportunity, for sure hoping to be more dripped out after that, and our boy obviously sees that. He said to himself that it makes sense since it's not hard for a merchant to notice the signs of approaching war. He'll definitely ask for more than the market price for the next clients. Our boy tells him that he expects him to keep this to himself, and the slave trader agrees, telling him that confidentiality is a basic part of business. He asks our prince if he would like him to send the slaves to his territory. The prince asks how long it would take to gather 50,000 people, and the slave trader dude responds, saying around 5 days. How the hell does he even have that amount of slaves in the first place? The prince tells him that he'd come for them himself in 5 days, and Ian asks him if he's really sure he wants to do that as it might be cumbersome. The prince tells him that it's fine and quickly makes his way out of there. Standing behind the closed doors, he says to himself that he has a mountain of preparations to do when he gets back home, and his lazy ass doesn't want to do any of that. He figures he'll use this as an excuse to be lazy for the next 5 days. His perfectly justified life of sweet idleness awaits. Later on, Arel meets Kania. She's surprised at the news that they can't go back home for the next 5 days. She asks him if he's sure that's all right as everyone is busy. Our prince cheekily calls her an innocent child and tells her that lazing around when you're busy is much more sweeter than lazing around when you're free. But Kania insists they should ask to see if they could just head home. Our boy asks her if she wants to look around the capital. She paused for a bit and lands in a flashback. Because of her position as princess and the attack from the dark sect, Kania had to spend most of her days inside of the royal palace. She'd be super serious about the outside world, and definitely wouldn't be able to resist this offer. So she concedes and asks the prince if they're going sightseeing. Errol tells her yes, and he already delegated all the important tasks to others, so they can afford to stay here for a while. And besides, she doesn't even have anything to do when she gets back. She'd be the unemployed princess. She agrees and tells him that it's just this once, and Errol's mission of convincing Kania is a success. As they walk around the hustle and the bustle, Kania exclaims that their territory's village is really small compared to this metropolis. Errol tells her that it's because they live in a rural area. He reminds her to hold his hand so they don't get lost. They try out some delicious snacks, while Kania tries out delicious snacks. They check out the fountain, and Kania sees that it's smaller than the one they've got. Then Kania spots something and shows our ice cream prince, some items that he had made a long time ago. She remembers seeing them before, and Arel freaks out at the sight of the banner. He's super embarrassed at it, and that's when he realizes that that's one of their own shops. So he stylishly pushes Kania so they can go see some other less embarrassing stuff. The princess goes in anyway and realizes that they sell swords here. The seller welcomes them and offers them a sword that he claims is just for them. The seller goes sword lecture mode and tells Kania about the smelters of some swords. He offers her a 10% discount, but our prince quickly cuts him off, saying that it's absolutely hopeless. He understands he wants to make money but shouldn't sell counterfeit products. The seller tries to deny, claiming that their swords were approved by the dwarves, but Errol just asks her to infuse it with a bit of her chakra. She does this, and now the sword made by the dwarves is now dwarven just by a little bit of aura. The seller tries to deny it, but the prince threatens to take him to the forge to check, but the seller apologizes immediately. For the price of forgiveness, Errol takes a dagger for cheap, and after they leave, Errol tells the princess that the dagger is a true dwarven-made dagger, and he gives it to her as a gift. Kania is really happy with the gift, and this makes it boy very contented. Fast forward a few days later, the slaves march up with the prince and princess. Kania tells him that this might be too excessive, but Arel tells her to imagine commanding 20,000 people at once. She admits that would feel good. The gates open and everyone is thrilled to see the prince until they aren't. They're terrified by the amount of people he had gathered. They tell him that they're too many, and ask him questions like how they're going to feed them all and if they should have waited a little before increasing their forces, as they don't have enough evidence of war yet. The prince responds by telling them that it's not doubt that a war would happen. He asks them to trust him as he's never been wrong before. They listen to him and he asks for their help with something. They're going to turn those slaves into elite soldiers who would guard the region of Fahilia. They'll first select the promising ones among them and prioritize their training. Then they'll become commanders of each unit and train the rest of the troops. He wants them to direct the whole operation with a basic training guide he'll give them, and he's leaving it to Ashuo and Sheena. They're going to get real busy from now on, because they're going for the leaders of the 3 territories alliance, and he'd make them pay for making him work.